All right, we're live.
Woo!
Hello and welcome to the third episode of Marooned, a podcast about Survivor by UChicago students. My name is James Kane, and I'm here today to preview Survivor Heroes, Healers, and Hustlers, which is premiering later this month. Today, Alex Yu, who I've had with me before, could not make it. But never fear, I have two great guests with me today. First is a woman who was once a huge fan of Survivor, took a little bit time off, but jumped back into Survivor Game Changers. We have Stacy. Stacy, how you doing?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Pretty solid, pretty solid. Great to have you.
Great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And second, we got a guy who I once overheard in a freshman math class talk unironically about Survivor, and the rest is history. We got Ben Levine. Ben, how you doing?
Doing great. Very excited for a season full of 18 new players, 18 new faces on our TVs each Wednesday. Couldn't be more excited to talk through all with you guys.
Yeah, it'll be great. Like Ben said, we'll talk through all 18 people and give you our take on how each of them are going to do, and then ultimately pick some winners at the end. So before we jump into the players, I think it's best that we talk a little bit about yourselves first. So maybe starting with Ben, could you talk a little about why you're into Survivor, your Survivor fanship history, and maybe who your favorite player is?
Sure. I started out as a longtime casual fan. As long as I've lived, my family's watched Survivor, and my first real memories of it start around the Cook Island days, but I was really just a casual fan.
Cook Island's one?
Until some guy, James came around at UChicago and told me about this Rob Has a Podcast thing. And then once I discovered that there was this whole group of fans who are real super fans, over the past year or so, I've tried my best to catch up and become a super fan myself. So I've been watching season after season. I've spent far too much time this summer watching Survivor, listening to the evolution of strategy, listening to Survivor historians, really catching up on different people's perspectives on all things Survivor. And I'm excited to take that new super fandom and apply it to finally a season of newbies. See if I can take what I've learned and give some hot takes on the matter, and see if I can prove that my super fan assessment is true.
And hot takes are very welcomed here as
Awesome.
well as super fans. So you're in the right place.
Great.
And who's one of your favorite?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Survivors?
It's kind of a cliche answer, James, but I just love Rob Cesternino. Is that too cliche?
No, I love the guy.
I just think that what he did in Amazon, if you really break it down and look at the game the first 5 seasons, it was just all you get in your alliance, you stick with it, you knock out, you pagang the other alliance. Mm-hmm. And Rob Cesternino took that, put it on its head, and said, you know what, let's flip back and forth a little bit when appropriate. He really brought a new dimension to the game that literally, talk about game changers last year. He's the one who really changed the game, and so I just have so much respect for him for that. If you look on the newer side of things, I'd say Tony, another cliche answer, but he's just so exciting. I mean, not only with Tony, also Rob the same. Not only do you get the awesome Survivor play, but really whenever they're on the screen, they really pop out. And so for me, Tony, you can't compare him to anyone. I know a lot of people say Tony, Russell, they're kind of similar. Tony stands alone for me.
Yeah, and hopefully they change the game both so much. Maybe we'll get a Rob Cesternino 3.0 or Tony Vlachko 3.0. Only in our Survivor fanship dreams. We'll see about that. So Stacy, same question. Could you talk a little bit about your Survivor background and maybe who your favorite player is in Survivor history?
Well, appropriately as the token old lady here, I've also been watching since season 1. My family got into Borneo way back. I was 6 years old. I watched with my family. I didn't really get it because I was 6, but I stuck with it, right? And we kept watching, and I remember all the stuff I remember the controversy around Cook Island. I remember Fiji. Like, I just rewatched. I actually most recently rewatched Fiji before that Micronesia, and then before that HVB. So I was like in the like whole the throwback vibe. Oh yeah, and I think before versus Villains was Pearl Island. So really loading up on the interesting ones there. So I was very into the show probably up until about the era of Heroes vs. Villains. I don't remember actually when or why, but I think this is about the time I got into Parks and Rec. So took a big chunk out of my life. Parks and Rec is my Survivor's my side bitch. Parks is my main bitch. But I you know, dropped it for a few years and heard James was gonna scream Game Changers. Sandra would be back, and I love Sandra. Into it, and then like got way more into it than I was expecting. See, because when I first watched the show, I was never on like I wasn't on the subreddit. I wasn't like reading stuff or listening to podcasts. But now it's like, oh, this all exists. And I read the subreddit every day at work. Like I sit there and just like, you know, go on our Survivor instead of doing my actual job.
I love it.
Nice.
Yeah, admitting this on, you know, on a live video here. But yeah, I am a recently returned fan, so I haven't seen a lot of the ones since like the mid to late 20s as far as Survivor seasons go. So I'm an old school fan, one of those. But I would say my favorite player, and I think it's actually changed because I know, James, you know that I am a huge fan of Sandra's, but I think ever since watching Fiji that I'm back to saying Yao Man is my favorite. I really loved his friendship with Earl. I think watching that was like, oh, I actually remember why I liked Fiji as opposed to everyone else who has, I feel like, a lot of mixed reactions toward Fiji.
That's me.
Hey, I mean, it's a weird season. There's a lot of people I really dislike in it, but also Yao Man and Earl are my one true Survivor friendship pairing, so, you know.
Can't dispute that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So Yao Man's my favorite, but actually, I think, and part of why that kind of reminded me to watch Fiji was because of Yao Man. It feels like a similar role, but like, you know, in new school Survivor, right? And so like, you know, he's the one with all the idols, and I'm like, oh, okay, you give me the same kind of like, you know, resourceful, like under the radar kind of vibe. So as far as like newer school, I'm gonna go back and probably rewatch or probably go back and watch Korong pretty soon, just to see Tai 1.0, and we'll see what that is.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. We're glad to have you back into the show and have that a little bit of an old school perspective on things. And yeah, that'll be great to watch the new season together and finally check out A Cast of Newbies. So also before we jump into the players themselves, I want to ask you guys about your takes on the season's theme as a whole. As you guys know, this year the theme is Heroes, Healers, and Hustlers. And we've seen before in the past this 3-tribe format in a lot of recent seasons. So we've seen Brains, Brawn, Beauty, White Collar, Blue Collar, No Collar, Brains, Brawn, Beauty again. So we've seen this label that's thrown on these seasons. And, you know, Brains, Brawn, Beauty 1 was seen as a great season. Season 30, you know, not so much in the eyes of a lot of fans. What do you guys think of the theme for this season? If one of you guys want to.
I really think that the hero, healer, hustler labels, obviously it's kind of silly. You look at the profession of, you got an actuary as a hero, you got a probation officer as a healer, you got a bellhop as a hustler. What do the labels really mean? I think it's just that, labels. What I'm more interested to see is two things about this season. One is I love the 3-tribe format. I love the 18 people, groups of 6. That leads to usually some exciting first votes. Going all the way back to All-Stars. But the other thing I'm really excited about this season is I've talked a little bit about it with you, James, off the air, is the new end game scenarios that are going to be a factor here. And that is, for anyone listening who hasn't heard yet, when we get down to the final 4, it's not going to be a traditional vote. What's going to happen is the person who wins immunity, rather than a traditional vote, that person is going to pick one person to be safe, and then the other 2 people not selected are going to have a fire duel competition, and the winner of that will make it to the final 3. So no traditional vote at the final 4, which makes the final 5 vote more exciting. And that Final Four vote where you lose someone like a Spencer from Cagayan or a Wentworth from Cambodia, people like that who are these big jury threats won't be able to be eliminated directly at 4. The only chance for that will be at 5. And I'm fascinated to see how that makes the end game play out.
I totally agree. I think this is going to be a great twist. I'm excited for it. And even when we get to the end of the game, regardless of who's there, I think, like you said, you pointed out a lot of pros to this decision. Also, I like the fact that, Jeff Probst for years has said, this is a, $1 million fire challenge. And, it harkens back to what Survivor at its core is a lot about, and that is the survivor element, or at least it was in the very beginning. And bringing that element back, I like a lot, and it's such high stakes. And we look back at a lot of seasons and seasons rankings and say, oh, this is part of the right reason why this was a great season is because there was this split vote at the Final Four, and this forced the fire making challenge. But now we get that guaranteed, and I think that's great. And I also, like you said, like the implications for that for the Final 5. Stacey, do you have any want to weigh in on the Final Four twists that we have?
Well, I feel like if you did a Final Four fire making challenge with Cook Islands, that would have been pretty hilarious. Once again, you were like, oh, it'll be so exciting, and I go, Becky and Sundra beg to differ.
Yep.
we're gonna bring that up.
It has plot potential, but at its upside, I like the upside.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to also talk about the downside of it? Because I'm sure there are going to be people who let me just play devil's advocate a little bit. People saying this game is about voting people out until you can vote people out no more. People then with the Final 3 say, hey, Final 3 doesn't make a lot of sense because you still could vote someone out technically. And then here, the last real vote will be at the Final 5. So what do you two think about that side of it? That we're really changing it from a game where voting out, and at the end of the game, it'll be voting in.
Right. So that's it. So one problem that I might have with it is that it gives the person who has immunity too much power. And so that whole aspect of voting in is a little lopsided. I guess it would make the Final Four immunity challenge even more competitive. But then you could kind of bring your ally. So in a way, one of the complaints that some people have about the show and in its Final 3 format is that, you can just form alliance of 3 and that's that. But this kind of incentivizes people to strategize ahead of time, like, hey, let's form this Final 2 in a sense, and let's guarantee us to say you win immunity, bring me with you. And that would kind of alienate whoever you don't pick. So that's kind of my take on it. It does have interesting strategic implications, but then again, it could give too much power to the immunity holder. Stacey, do you have what do you think?
Well, personally, if you mentioned, so much power to the one person with immunity, hopefully at that point there's only one immunity left, because I don't think I could handle another advantage get-in, if you ask me. I'm a little bit over that, and by a little, I mean a lot. I'm one of those people who's very vocal about how much I feel like immunity idols are one thing. I think they're great, but I also think that having so many of them at that point in the game, especially with the legacy advantage, which is just another idol, felt like overkill. And so I'm worried that as a hipster old school fan of Survivor, sometimes I think twists are great. I think it's great to toss up the game, but I also think that if you take away from the fundamentals of strategizing and saying, okay, if you find the idol, you're basically secure till the end, and you don't have to do any real strategizing or social game, then it kind of cheapens the effect a little. So hopefully they navigate it in a way that doesn't make it too OP. I was reading people's rants about the super idol from Cook Islands actually, and thinking about how sometimes if one idol is just too concentrated, then it feels almost rigged in a way. And so hopefully we don't get that.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other things that you mentioned, Stacey, is the legacy advantage from last season, how that ended up playing out, and that Sarah was immune at the Final 6, and it was part of this whole immunity getting. But as far as I know, Ben, there are no kind of hints that we'll have the legacy advantage back for this season.
Good.
And there will not be the same tiebreaker twists that came into play last season. So just a quick recap, even though it was not a factor in Game Changers. So if there was a tie vote at any point in game changers, it would have gone to rocks, and people would have had to draw rocks, and whoever drew the wrong one out of the people who weren't immune and did not have votes against them would go home. Any thoughts on either of those twists not coming back?
Yeah, well, I think the legacy advantage, Stacey touched on it a little bit. I'm not a big fan of the legacy advantage, but I do think that Sarah's biggest move, best move in the game was that play with Sierra that she did to blindside Sierra and still have Sierra give her the legacy advantage, which ended up saving Sarah's game, leading her to the top. So that move was one of the most brilliant moves I've ever seen in this game. But still based on an advantage that I didn't like. So some mixed feelings there. In terms of the tie vote situation, I think that the tie vote definitely had a big impact in last season in the sense that we didn't see any tie votes. I think that actually makes people fear flipping even more because they don't want to go to rocks. I mean, we've seen it time and time again, the amount of stress that the possibility of rocks can invoke in the game. So I think that it was still a factor even though it didn't come into play. And I think that if I was a producer on Survivor, I'd want to encourage people to flip, to try to make their own way in this game. And I think that removing that twist that we had last year is a good thing. And I'm excited for it to go back to normal with the revote. And
yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was thinking about drop the thought right there. I had to put back a spoon. Yeah, I definitely think that if we oh my God, I dropped it. Don't worry about it. Skip me. We'll come back.
No worries.
Okay.
Yeah, I completely dropped my thought.
Yeah, if it comes back to you, yeah, just feel free to.
Oh, I do agree though. I think that that was a defining Sarah move, and I am very cognizant that was her big thing, and that definitely was the game changer, if you will. But I also think mixed reactions as well. Like Ben, I think that just because it got this great result doesn't mean that it wasn't still kind of a flawed advantage to start with.
Completely.
I found it.
Yeah, and the fact that one of the things that people brought up that they felt that was a little unfair about the legacy advantage is unless you were Zeke and knew that the legacy advantage came into play in Millennials Gen X, nobody else knew that there was this advantage out there. And in a game where power is knowledge, the fact that such a huge advantage was not known by anyone really was, also a little questionable. But I'm also kind of glad to see it go. We'll see what other twists come into play. I know Jeff Probst really hasn't, advertised a lot of them up front when promoting the season, but you never know. Like last season, we didn't know about Debbie having that ridiculous X Factor.
Don't get me started on that, James.
So
the Cochrane circle jerk sash. I mean,
I'll some people might call it that. But we'll see. I'm sure we're in for some twists that we don't know about. But yes.
If I can insert a thought.
Yeah.
I just remembered I was reading the subreddit and people were talking about how Probst has brought up the procedure for what would happen if there was a tie at Final Tribal Council. I mean, we touched on it briefly last season when it was realized that it would be between Sarah and Culpepper, that Troyzan wouldn't be involved. And so if it came down to a tie, that Troyzan would be the one deciding. And so the fact that we've hinted at that makes some people on the subreddit, as well as myself, wonder, are we going to get a Final Tribal Council tie? And what would that even entail? That would be so crazy. Do does Probst tally it up there and go, oh shit, there's a tie, we gotta, make the last person decide, right on the spot, off camera. What does that mean? And I'm really excited. I'm personally kind of hoping for an FTC tie. With the newbies, it'll be just it won't be as I feel like there wouldn't be as much of a bias because these are people that we haven't been invested in over the course of multiple seasons. So I'm excited. I hope there is one, personally.
Yeah. I think that's an excellent point that you bring up.
Uh-oh. Anyone?
I'm here. James has gone black.
Yeah, James has gone to very frozen expression.
Yeah, on my end, James's screen is entirely black, so
I see James contorted in a very, very funny facial expression.
That's funny. Do you want to wait for him to come back? I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah, let me see what's up. Well, if we're on the air, James has disappeared. The leader of the intrepid leader of our party, has gone MIA.
Do you have any other thoughts on the season? Since I think we probably are still live on the. Oh, James is completely.
Oh no, he just.
There he is. He's back now.
Hello.
He's back.
We lost you for a second there, James, our fearless leader.
Yeah. Sorry about that. I think that was on my network down here. I'm in my parent.
Uh oh. There he goes again.
I'm gonna get some orange juice.
Find a new location, but nothing we can do about that. I'm sure he'll work things out on his end. But in the meantime, Stacy, do you have any other thoughts on the new season, kind of in general, before James comes back and we start to unpack it person by person?
Oh, I'm not gonna lie. I am mildly irritated by the fact that now we will have 2 heroes tribes to refer to in history. One of them being the ridiculous, surprisingly train wrecky HVV team,
exactly.
And now whatever this is gonna be. So
yeah, can't be worse than last Heroes Tribe, or at least can't be more disappointing than last Heroes Tribe.
Yeah.
I still maintain they should have listened to Sandra. I'm just saying.
Yep.
Am I back, by the way?
James is back. James is back and ready to go. Hopefully the connection holds up here. James, do you want to start moving into the player by player at this point?
Yeah. One thing that I just want to quickly mention before we move in is that Stacy brought up a great point in that it seemed like a little weird timing for Jeff Probst to bring up the whole what would happen in a tiebreaker scenario at the season 34 finale, which leads me to believe that season 35 was filmed. I think already filmed completely at that point. And without spoiling the outcome of the season, Jeff has said in some interviews that I've watched that this season it's very close towards the end, especially at the final tribal council and the final vote. So that might hint at, okay, might come into play this season, but we'll see. At this point we can only speculate. But yeah, we'll jump into the players now. So I'm thinking we can start with the first H in the season title. So we'll start with heroes, and we can go in first name alphabetical order. So that would make us start with Alan. So we'll start with Alan Ball. He is technically still a football player. He's a free agent at this point, although he suffered a couple injuries.
He's retired, James. He's retired. Call it. I know. I think I heard the same interview you did, where he says, "I'm not retired." He's retired.
Okay. I guess he's technically still in the market but for the most part, he's retired.
I think your Giants need him.
Oh man!
After last week, it was pretty bad. So hey, we can use it.
Well, the Steelers barely beat Cleveland, so I was having a mild coronary over there.
At least you got the W.
A dirty W. Oh man.
Yeah. But yeah. So he is yet another former athlete we have on the show, following the likes of Brad Culpepper, John Rocker, Gary Hodgeboom, aka Gary Hawkins.
Gary Hawkins, landscaper.
So, how do you guys think he compares to these other athletes that come on the show in Survivor history?
For me,
well, I think.
Go ahead, Stacey. Sorry.
Sure. I mean, we've dealt with. Did you mention Culpepper?
Yeah.
I can't remember. Okay, but I feel like we've run into, at least with former NFL players, and even I guess Jimmy Johnson, but we run into people much later on in their much long after their careers and way later in life, and so it's less of a clear dominant physical thing because you see Culpepper's old football day photos. He was huge. And he's just skinny out there, even before the starvation. And you think about how it's been several years, and the fact that we're joking about Alan Ball, whether he's retired or not, means that he's still young and he's still super in shape, and that might make him really big challenge beast. And I think that's certainly for instance last year Brad went on a immunity run toward the end, which is great, and he's still a very fit guy, but Alan's even younger. Mm-hmm. Maybe even more OP,
And what could be in his benefit too is that you mentioned that Brad went on that immunity run. Now, given Brad is a little bit older and like you said, Allen could be even more of a physical threat. But at this point, when they went out there, the contestants had only seen up to maybe episode 5 or 6 of Game Changers. They had not seen Brad's immunity run yet, and maybe then they can underestimate Allen's physical ability when it comes down in the individual portion of the game.
You look at Allen Ball, and I think the last thing you're going to do is underestimate his physical ability. He's one of many buff guys we got this year, so perhaps that helps him. Perhaps the Jeremy Collins meat shield strategy might come into play here. But this guy stands out even amongst the buff guys as one of the strongest. And although he says he may not reveal straight away that he's an NFL player, I think that regardless of what profession he may say he is, his body kind of speaks for itself, and I think that he's going to immediately be a physical threat. But I really don't see the Heroes going to Tribal Council early in this game, so I think that might benefit Allen. And he's also super likable. When you go back to the athletes we've seen, especially in recent years, they've all been kind of hard to get along with. Culpepper, most famously, perhaps Rocker even more famously. But Allen Ball really strikes me as a really likable guy. I think the bigger problem for him will be, does he have the strategic chops? Yet to see it. When you look at some of his interviews, he said that the Survivor contestant he's most like is no one, because he says that no one will play the way he has. He's talking a big game, so that'll to be seen whether that comes into play nicely. But I'm excited to see him out there. He seems like a really likable guy.
And that being said, so I also agree that he might not have the best strategic head on his shoulders, maybe from a lot of inexperience, not having seen the show like some of the other super fans that we have here. How do you think he's going to do ultimately in the game? Will his strategic experience catch up with him at a certain point? And if so, when do you think that might be?
I'm thinking early merge boot. At the most, I think that he will be identified. Once if you set out the crowd, you go, oh wait, who's the really ripped guy, winning all the challenges? And I feel like, well, hopefully he'll pick an alternate career that isn't landscaper. I feel like maybe he'll get away with it longer. But I think that if he's not cunning strategically, that he probably won't make it much past the merge, because that's when they really start picking off anyone that shows even a pulse at challenges.
Do you agree with that, Ben?
I think that you also have to take a look at the way the game's going to play out beyond just what are people going to assess Allen as. I think that something really interesting will be to see which tribes dominate early on. I think most people that the Hustlers will kind of be like a Luzon or Matt Singh even type tribe that might just completely collapse, and that'll be beneficial for Allen. But we've also seen, going all the way back to one of my favorite seasons, Token Teens with Timbira, that even if you have the numbers at the merge or at a swap, oftentimes if you don't have the opportunity to eliminate people for chemistry reasons, that can come back to haunt you. And I see a few players on the Heroes tribe that just very much don't fit in with the rest, and we'll kind of get to that later on. But I could see the Heroes tribe having 1 or 2 people, if they make it far enough, really flip this game on its head. And I do in the end agree with Stacy that he likely will be someone who makes the merge or at least post first swap. But I wonder whether he'll be eliminated as a physical threat or just as a byproduct of someone flipping to the other side.
And
very valid.
I would also, my prediction would also kind of be very similar there. I think the Heroes will do very well overall early on. I think this is a guy who's been around a lot of NFL locker rooms. He's not really played for one team consistently throughout his career. So I think given a swap situation, he can manage to do pretty well. Gets the merge though, I think that's where his kind of lack of strategic chops will catch up to him a bit. He's also a little cocky given his, no one's like me assessment of himself. So I would agree that he is, will make the merge, but he'll be around a merge boot. So do you guys have anything else to add on Allen before we move on to Ashley?
No, I'm good.
Okay, then we'll move on to Ashley Nolan. So Ashley is a 26-year-old lifeguard, also on the Heroes tribe. And She, I think, will do pretty well in the game. Jeff Probst seems to like her a lot. I think that she can do well. She seems pretty relaxed, she gives off a pretty chill kind of vibe as a lifeguard. But she's not afraid, to make waves when the time comes. She could be a bit independent, although this might be come to haunt her if she's seen as too strong-willed or too stubborn. And also another concern of mine is that in some pre-show interviews, some castaways saw her as a little off-putting, and she didn't give off the greatest vibes in the pregame. You can kind of debate how much those first impressions, even before day one, matter in the game. Ultimately, I don't think they matter too much. So I think that she'll do well enough, and she kind of reminds me of Sierra in the sense that she likes this independence a lot and will not afraid to make big moves. Do you guys have anything to say to respond to like what I just said, or anything other takes to add to Ashley?
Ben?
I think Ashley's an interesting one. I kind of just from what I've heard from her get the vibe that I'm personally not going to like her, but that doesn't mean that she won't be successful in the game. I see probably the thing that ticked me off the most from reading some of the things that she said is I love the question, Survivor contestant you're most like. I mentioned it with Alan, and I'll mention it again here with Ashley. She said there, Richard Hatch, but the reasoning is what throws me off. Richard Hatch seemed to have the right idea, and because he won, I am a winner. Not a lot of
oh no
that one. But I think that in the early game she'll be fine. She's the most physical of the ladies on the Heroes tribe, so I don't see her being an early boot. In fact, I could very easily see her teaming up with the 3 men and making an alliance there. And I think that once we get to that merge or swap situation, which I just personally predict that the Heroes tribe will kind of fracture and fall apart a bit later in the game, I would think that she would be one of the last heroes that they boot off, because when you look at the 3 men on the hero tribe and you look at Ashley, she's probably the least threatening, probably both strategically and physically. So I would see her making it pretty far in the game, but I'd say she has a pretty minimal shot to win, because I just predict that she'll rub some people the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. And where do you think that kind of comes from, the fact that she might rub people the wrong way? Is that kind of related to that, which player you most like answer?
It starts off with the first impressions. Then comes down to when she talks about who she's most like, she kind of gives a kind of just very straight, direct, and cold answer. In all the other interviews that I've seen, it's hard to put your nose on, hard to put your finger on, but she just strikes me as just a little bit annoying. And I just pick up that other players will probably get that vibe as well. But who knows? I've only listened to her talk for 10 minutes, so who am I to judge her this early on?
Yeah. And Stacey, how do you think she'll fare out there in that Heroes tribe?
So when you guys compare her to Sierra, do you mean Sierra Thomas, or do you mean
Sierra Easton?
Sierra Easton. Okay, because I'm actually getting a different Sierra vibe from this. She kind of reminds me of the same intimidating, super athletic blonde. And actually, if anything, so reminds me of Sierra, but also is giving me Kim Spradlin vibes. Not necessarily in gameplay wise, but the same ambition and almost a little too I will do this kind of vibe. And so there's 2 ways to go, right? Kim won and everyone loved her, but then you have Sierra, who got a little bit too in her head and was like, there's a new sheriff in town, and then got blindsided. And so I wonder if which way she'll go. I would probably say more towards Sierra, but that's the first. Those are the first 2 people I thought of when she said Hatch, and I go, no, I'm getting Sierra Dawn Thomas vibes here.
I really like the Dawn Thomas comparison, Stacey. I really do. Except I think that Dawn Thomas really showed in her last game that she's got some strategy up her sleeves. And I don't know. Maybe I'm being too critical here, but I don't think Ashley, from what I've seen, doesn't seem like the biggest fan of the show. And I think that Dawn Thomas has a lot more strategy than Ashley. So we'll see how it works out. But that's just what I'm gathering from what I've seen so far. What's your take on all this, James?
So I agree with a lot of what you guys said in that. I think I don't know if she'll be the Sierra Dawn Thomas on the second time around, but maybe a little bit of both Sierras, mostly harkening back to Sierra Dawn Thomas her first time around.
Good point.
I think, like we said, the Heroes tribe will do well enough early on to not really go to tribal council, and that's due in large part to Ashley being a good physical contributor. Come the merge though, I think, or a swap, maybe she'll be likable. I could see her being a good alliance member, but ultimately I just don't, nothing really pops out for me to say, I think you're gonna win, or I think you have a really good shot at winning. So for me, my prediction for Ashley is maybe slightly above Alan Balls. I'll say she gets the merge, but I don't think she gets too far once she gets to the merge.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I think we're good on Ashley. You guys want to move on to Ben?
Sure.
So we're not talking about Ben Levine. We're talking about Ben Drybergen. Maybe I'm botching that last name. So Ben is a former Marine, and he has a pretty interesting look to him. Have you taken a look at cast pictures, Stacey?
I have it open right now. Actually, I have the cast preview open right now, just so I can check for names and stuff. Yeah, he. Who does he remind me of? Huh.
I don't know. He's pretty unique, both from a look and from what I've heard of him. The interesting thing about Ben to me is that people keep identifying him as the biggest threat on all the pre-game interviews. People say this guy's the biggest threat. If you look at him, he's not the most athletic guy out there. He's doesn't look right away as the smartest guy out there, right? So maybe that is a threat. Oftentimes the person who's most well-rounded wins games like these. So hard to tell what we're going to get out of Ben, but I think he has a good potential to be a good character. Marine background, seems to be a real family man, and I think that he'll be someone who the fans end up rooting for. But I think similar to the people we've talked about before, he doesn't seem to have the strategic element of the game, and I think that's something we'll see throughout the majority of this Heroes tribe. Likable people, strong people, but the strategic side of the game might be where they're lacking. So I'd put up a similar prediction for him in terms of a merge boot or a post swap kind of deal.
Yeah. So so I have a slightly different take when it comes to Ben, which is kind of funny given that he kind of gave me very mixed signals compared to a lot of other people. I couldn't get the greatest read on him, but he seems to have a lot of similarities to Ralph Kaiser of
Oh dear.
I heard not the best person to, maybe from a physical standpoint, also kind of like gives off that same kind of rough, but also gives like a teddy bear vibe, like he describes himself. One thing that concerned me is he said he was going to play like Boston Rob and Russell Hantz. And
he compared himself to Russell, Boston Rob, and Joe Anglim, and I go,
yeah. I mean,
we got a villain on our hands.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to at least have a decent background knowledge of Survivor, but this seems like a guy who, at least from putting 3 people in that section of his bio standpoint, he seems like somebody who I think is going to overplay his hand and just, if the Heroes aren't going to Tribal Council, he might kind of just stir the pot for no reason. Or at least that's what I kind of think. And so I think in a possible swap, or if the Heroes go to Tribal Council, I think he will be a pre-merge boot. What do you?
I definitely think that guys like that, and especially now that he's quoting like Russell, it's like guys like that, if you spark them a little too early, they get really abrasive. I feel like that's the kind of like edit that players like that get. If you're like instantly like, oh, I gotta play like Russell, I gotta play like Rob, I gotta really get myself up in there. And I think that can make you really vulnerable. So I think that if he's able to, if he's got the positive aspects of those 3, then I would say he might go pretty far. But if he's like got that same like kind of ruthlessness, like I don't give a fuck what people think, like then we might have a earlier boot on our hands.
So which one do you think it's going to be, Stacey? Do you see that upside?
I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be quite as socially adept to, because he seems like he's very, I am a leader and I am tough, but that's not necessarily the most like that can be alienating, I think.
So overall, where do you think he'll land in the ultimate like boot order?
I'll say pre-merge.
All right. Anything else to add on Ben?
I think that the only thing I think you mentioned it a little bit, but I I want to reiterate, I have a feeling that this guy will emerge as the leader of the Heroes tribe at the beginning, and generally we see that's not the best place to be. So it'll be interesting to see whether pre-merge, merge. I don't think any of us have him winning the game, but I think it'll be an interesting one to watch play. And sometimes that's all you need. Only one person can win, but that doesn't mean they all can't be entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah. Cool. So with that being said, we'll move on to the fourth hero. So we got Chrissy. So Chrissy, here's where my bias is gonna start coming out. Is from New Jersey, and here's where my bias is gonna come out again. She's an actuary, and my dad's also an actuary.
Aww.
Bit of connection there.
A heroic actuary, though.
Yeah. So you mentioned, Ben, that this seems like a little bit of an odd placement, at least from an occupation standpoint, of putting Christy, the actuary, on this Heroes tribe. But how do you think she's going to fare in this Heroes tribe to start out?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on Chrissy. I think she's one of the more interesting people on this hero tribe. She's 46, but she plans to lie about her age. We'll see how that works out. But she is the smartest person on this cast from just an objective IQ standpoint. She is the smartest person on this cast. She's made a lot of money in her life. And I wonder how that'll come into play. But I think the bigger thing from a game standpoint is I have a feeling that she's going to not connect as well with those three. We've talked about two of them, three buff men on the Heroes tribe, really strong-willed alpha types. And I think Ashley will likely go along with those three, leaving Chrissy and Katrina, who we haven't talked about, kind of on the outs. Just a prediction, but that's how I see it. I think that likely we could come into a situation where Chrissy's the kind of person who's going to want to make a big move. And I think that she's the one who could, if the situation arises, I could see her flipping over to the healer side and making a big move to start eliminating some of these heroes if the opportunity arises. And I'm going to make a hot take, as you call it.
Oh, here we go.
Say that Chrissy is going to find her way kind of in a cast role, perhaps a little bit more likable, but I'm going to say something like a cast role and end up something like third place, but get eviscerated by the jury. And I think Chrissy will be the one deciding our winner in that tie situation that we've talked a little bit about. So that's my hot take.
Getting a little hot. That's a very hot take.
That's my first hot take of the evening.
There we go.
I made my soup seem cold in comparison.
That's awesome. So like we kind of brought up before, so if, like you said, we brought up that fact that maybe the heroes will make the merge intact or almost all the way intact. Do you think that's when she might kind of flip the switch like a Cass and say, that's where I'm going to jump, and then that's the trajectory you see her on?
Well, yeah, just take a look at the people on this tribe. We've talked about now 2/3 of them. And I think that we get a sense that these are some people who wouldn't generally hang out with an actuary. And I know sometimes in life you see unlikely alliances all the way going back to Rudy and Richard. But I don't think Chrissy fitting in here. But I also think that she's smart and competent enough, along with being on a phenomenal tribe, to make it to that merge. But I think she's also smart enough to say, I'm probably in the 5 spot on this tribe, and I think she's smart enough to say, let's see if I can wheel and deal a little bit. And I think that she is smart enough to make it all the way to the end, but I think that she's going to have to burn a bunch of bridges to get there. So I see her as a similar role in this season as a Cass, but I think slightly more likable. But she does have that sort of cold-hearted mindset when you see some of her interviews. So we'll see, but just one man's opinion. What do you think of all this, Stacey?
I don't know. I think that when I was reading subreddit, analyses of the cast, and a lot of people compared Chrissy to, I think, Denise, a winner that I'm not personally familiar with because I don't think I saw that year, and so I, have no comparison to make here. Cannot back it up whether I think that's true or not. But I definitely think that because she's going to be an older woman, and I think that historically when there's like a dude tribe, then they pick a girl who is either like really cute or like really athletic and like fun and like their age group, right? You have your sorry?
Ashley Nolan, for example, who's another.
That's what I'm saying. So I feel like they would pick. I feel like if there's a bro squad, they're gonna pick the cute lifeguard over someone who's a little older and someone who's a little she may show that she would make her own choices. I think Ashley might be better at hiding her underlying agenda and going along with it to start with. But I think Chrissy might be one of those people who might not be able to cover it up. And because of that might get isolated.
So Stacey, how do you think she can compensate for this, for her maybe not being the ideal candidate for those men to bring into potential 4-person alliance, let's say, to start?
Yeah, I don't know. I would say that maybe it would be a little easier. Like, I think reading a lot of these interviews, certainly everyone's coming into this thing like, I'm going to win and I'm going to kick butt. But I think there's a lot to be said about the UTR, the subtle, your Sandra Diaz Twine types, the ones who are like, maybe not the greatest challenge performers, but they do their work and they're a vote when it counts. And maybe like if you play a little more under the radar, that you can go a lot further. So, yeah.
And so ultimately, how do you think she will end up?
I don't know. I'd like to see her be the tie vote. I think that'd be pretty funny. So I will say, if she manages to stay UTR, I say like later in the merge / like almost FTC. But I don't know if she'd make final 3. I think maybe a little sooner than that.
So I think even though you guys both have see her going pretty far, at least maybe in Ben's case, maybe not far in the best sense and being a third place losing finalist, but I think I see a lot of upside for her. Like Ben said, she is one of a few people who have been super smart, who have appeared on the show. She went to UPenn, she went to MIT, and she's also a mom, so she's got a lot of life experience, and also her being an actuary and kind of going through jobs and having very high amount of responsibility in her jobs, I think suits her well. Based on her interviews, I think she has a lot of charisma. I think one of the interesting things she said about being an actuary is it's all about kind of assessing the risk of future events that are happening. And that's something that you really have to play in your mind out there, is kind of the what if. So what if this happens? What if, this person flips this, that, and the other? So I think if she makes the merge, she'll be very dangerous. And I think she can go all the way to the end, because she knows when to be cutthroat and when to be kind of like, friendly and personable. And I think she has a great mix when it comes to that. My only concerns with her would be that she's a bit on the older side. I don't know how well masking her age is going to go. Also don't know how physical she'll be. In terms of physical asset, I think the heroes, like we've established, will be fine early on, but that's a little bit of a question mark. But I have her going very, very deep, and we'll see if she can pull it out in the end. But I really like her chances here.
Look at us, all in agreement with pretty much all of them. Very cool.
So far, so good. Yeah, I really, as much as I want to see Chrissy do well and everything, I'd love if Ben's hot take comes true. And
hot take. I'm gonna get my charger, but you guys get started on the next one.
All right, sounds good. So the next one is JP. So JP, younger guy, firefighter, and to be honest, Ben, I think we both know where we're going with this. I don't know really why this guy's out here. He's really not, charismatic. There's nothing. I don't want to be mean, but there's like nothing really, from the person. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was just saying there's nothing redeeming about it. I've heard. I think it was Sesternino who said that JP is a person who is on this season of Survivor, and
there you go.
Do you see him going far though, as a under the radar type guy?
Honestly, I don't. I just, partly kind of stemming from what we said, when it comes down to the tough decisions, right? And maybe like a tribe swap in Korong where, numbers are on, like, they're lopsided numbers, and, the brains had decisions to make, specifically like Aubrey. Maybe in that scenario, if there's a swap or some sort of critical vote, I don't see anyone sticking their neck out on the line saying, I would lay down my torch for this guy. He seems a little detached. Jeff has also mentioned this a bit. And I was listening to one of Josh Wigler's interviews, and he said that kind of after their interview was over, they were kind of like taking pictures, or they had to do some more media stuff. And he goes like, "Oh, is this really necessary?" Like, kind of like a inside RHAP joke, kind of like a damn Lembo type of a very younger body. So yeah, and I ultimately see him also as a pre-merge boot. I know I already have Ben and JP, two heroes in a tribe that we think is going to do very well as pre-merge boots, but that's mostly a testament to I just don't see much upside for this guy. Stacy, what do you think of JP?
So I have the questionnaires on the left side of my screen here, and I've been reading them as we go along. And one of the questions that stuck out for JP here was the one that was 3 words to describe you, and he goes outgoing, adventurous, and romantic. And I go, don't you dare get into a showmance. I was 8 or 9, I think, when Rob proposed to Amber on national television, and I was like 8 or 9, so I was super into it. But years later, I'm like, y'all can stop. Which is to say that hopefully he's not just one of those like. My first thought was what's his name, Adam Gentry, and when he got with Candace. And
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing.
They were hanging out with each other. I'm like, buddy, play the fucking game. And I'm worried that he's gonna kind of come off as that like cute but dumb brick kind of thing, or he's like, oh, I do this. I'm pretty good in challenges, and I flirt with the girls, and I hope that's not the archetype he fulfills, but that's a popular Survivor archetype. We get guys like that, and so maybe he will be it, and maybe he won't be.
Mm-hmm. If I could just jump in, what I'd say is that when you think about Adam Gentry, though, although he may be one of the least memorable survivors on one of the least memorable seasons, at least in my perspective, he did get to, I think, 6th place. Mm-hmm. So you can still be boring and bad at the game and bad at television and still do fairly well at this game. And I think that JP could fit into that role, though I probably tend to be more on the James side and see him as someone who'll want to be kicked out on a post-swap situation. Mm-hmm. But we'll see. I definitely not someone who's going to I'm going to put my money down as he will not be playing a second time. I think that this is his shot at stardom, and we'll see how far it takes him.
I don't know how much money are you willing to put down on that?
A lot of money, James.
Are you guys 21 yet?
No.
I am.
So going back to something you said, Stacey, is that this guy might have showman's potential, or he describes himself as romantic. Do you see that potentially happening? I know that some people on maybe some threads have predicted that he might possibly get with Ashley. Do you see him being in any sort of showmance, and how do you think that might go for him if he ultimately ends up in a showmance?
Well, I definitely think he fits the bill for a guy that would be in a showmance. That being said, I don't actually know that we have a lot of girls, or at least on the Heroes tribe, that would be in a showmance, which is the interesting part. I think the girls so far that we've seen so far come off as very, very ambitious and very like, I'm here for this game and not just, oh, I'm here because this is fun and an adventure or something, and I think that Ashley seems like someone who might not take that shit, might not be like, oh, but you're so, like, I remember Candace, my first impression of Candace, which is so hilarious because, years later she's like much, much more developed as a character, but my first impression of Candace Woodcock is her being like, oh, but he's so cute. And so I think we don't have those kinds of, I don't think we have girls that give that impression, at least in this cast so far.
You don't see the actuary and the firefighter.
Oh my god!
The season.
I missed that back into your question.
Me neither.
Oh, of my question, or
no. I missed the back end of what Ben was saying. I
was just making a joke about how I can't. I'm totally with you. I cannot see any of these women really falling for.
Yeah.
I think that on another year, when my prediction goes wrong and he does make it onto that All-Star season, perhaps he can.
Oh my God!
But
you gotta have you'll have 4-time Survivor player JP Hilsebeck. Yeah, man, up in there. Maybe he'll be the next Aussie.
Survivor RRR Romantics. I don't know the rest. You finish that season, but hey, if they want alliteration again,
No,
there you
Survivor, Romantics, Revelers, and Rappers. I think I'd like that.
There you go.
There you go.
Well, yeah, season 36. Let's make it happen. So, are we any more comments when it comes to JP?
We've said too much about JP. We've devoted too much time to this man.
One thing though, not related to JP,
Yeah.
but I think we should carry this alliterative joke. I like making up bad parodies of this theme. So gonna put that out there. I start starting
They're
them.
the Survivor, apparently.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay.
All right. Anyway.
Well, hey, if we see it, we can. Well, let's help Jeff Probst come up with more ideas.
Oh, Jeff.
So I guess we'll round out the Heroes tribe with Katrina. So Katrina, like Christy, I believe, is 46, and she is a former Olympic swimmer. We kind of touched upon this already, that we can potentially see Christy and Katrina because they're a bit of the older kind of types, that they might not fit in as well as everybody else. Ben, how much of a problem do you see this for Katrina, and how do you think? What kind of upside do you see?
Debbie Warner upside potentially. But I think that the bigger problem for Katrina is less her tribe and more herself. She's the resident crazy person on the season, and that's okay. That serves a role. I mean, you see that she's an Olympian. You might think that, oh wow, that's a hero right there, and certainly she's
Crystal Cox.
Yeah, she certainly accomplished there. But like Crystal Cox, I think that Katrina's failures will likely less come from her physical ability and more from her social ability. She really, when you see her interviewed with a video, you kind of just get the sense that this lady's not gonna be the one to fall in love with JP either. I think that, like we've talked about with the Hero Tribe, I could really see a 4 emerging with the 3 guys and Ashley, and then you get to the situation if they get to a first tribal council as a Heroes Tribe. Would those 4 target Chrissy, the strategic threat, or Katrina, the crazy person? Now, a smart group of 4 would probably target Chrissy, but I don't think that those 4 are the masterminds that would do such a thing. And I think that they'll probably say, Katrina, this girl does just not fit in, and she's probably the weakest link physically as well, even though she is an Olympian. And I see that although we've covered Katrina last on this Hero Tribe, she will be the first one on the Hero Tribe to get the boot. That's my prediction.
First one out, or at least
out of the game, just
of the Hero Tribe. Of the Hero Tribe. Yeah, I was gonna say Josh Wickler. You can end your search right there. What do you? How about you, Stacy? What do you think of Katrina's chances? You see her. How do you think she'll end up doing if she can kind of get through this early portion of the game?
Yeah, so and actually an interesting thing about how I beefed up for doing this podcast here today was I have been reading all about this at work, which means that I haven't been able to watch videos at work. So I have no idea how she talks. I have no idea what her mannerisms are. I only have her cast photo and all the descriptions that I've read and all the things in the subreddit that I've read. And so of course, like the overall consensus is that Katrina is super annoying, but I won't know until I see her, right? And so with that in mind, actually, before I read more about her, I was thinking, oh, she fits the same like demographic as Chrissy. And one of the things I was thinking about, and I suppose it's not as applicable now that we've established distinct personalities, but I was thinking about I most recently rewatched Fiji. I was thinking about the whole dichotomy between or like lack of differences between Michelle Yee and Stacey Kimball, two East Asian girls who were in as like the strategizer, or like what Earl called Michelle his little monkey, like the spies of their respective alliances. And I remember thinking when Michelle got eliminated, it was because she was like worried about people thinking there's her and there's Stacey. You get rid of one and you keep the other because they're interchangeable. And so that was my thought going into this. Obviously, it's since changed, but it was something to think about. What it means to have an archetype in Survivor, especially if you are the same demographic, they're the same age, they're both blondes, who are ambitious and hardworking, and on the Heroes tribe and are exactly the same age, which is crazy, right? Like you almost think that's like made for you. But you bring up Debbie, and I think if she establishes herself right off the bat, it's a little bit not quite as subtle or like analytical as Chrissy, then early boot, really early boot. I think if you annoy enough people, you're out.
Yeah, I think like if Katrina or Chrissy can differentiate herself from Katrina, which I think ultimately their personalities will shine through and can separate each other. I think that Chrissy is certainly in the pre-merge portion of the game the much more valuable asset to the tribe. Chrissy is also at the even though I said her physical ability is a little bit of an unknown, she is very good at puzzles. And Katrina, we know she'll be a good swimmer. I don't know how she'll be on the puzzle kind of side, but nevertheless, at least I will say this about Katrina, as opposed to maybe a Debbie or an Abby, we know that she can be a asset in the challenges. Although Debbie at times had her moments in the challenges, but at times, not really on balance beam, but
the thing is, James, I'll jump in here and say that although she may not be a weakness physically, when you put her in this group of 6 that we've talked about, and you compare her to these other 5, she is the weakest physically. Olympian title aside, we just look at them today. Who is the weakest physically? I'd say that Chrissy probably has the advantage over Katrina just from looking at them. And maybe that's a superficial thing to say, but it just looks like Chrissy's in better shape than Katrina. Do you think that's fair?
I'm not sure. Mostly just because I haven't looked at a lot of cast photos, but we'll ultimately see how that plays out. I was kind of but in terms of like you guys said, her kind of social flaws, not only has she described herself as kind of talkative and she comes off a little quirky, but she also said she has a tendency to be blunt. And that is something that I do not think will serve her well at all in the game. And so as much as I want to kind of find the positives in her, I don't know if I can find too many. And so I would pin her as a pre-merge boot as well. So any other words on Katrina?
I've always said that if I were ever to go on Survivor, I'd have to fundamentally change everything about my personality because, like Katrina, I'm also enthusiastic and a fast talker. So if I know this going in and she doesn't know this going in, then
True.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be seeing much of her.
I think we'll get to a couple more enthusiastic fast talkers on some of these other tribes too. See how yeah. So we'll see how they fare. So I guess that wraps up our conversation on heroes. So I guess we'll move on to the second H, which are the healers. Now I'm a little less familiar with the alphabetical order of the healers. So to the best of my knowledge, I think we'll be starting with Cole.
Yep.
So Cole is a young guy. He's 24, and he is a wilderness therapist, if I have that right. Wilderness therapy guide, right? Is that something like that?
All right. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Forget his exact title, but to me, he kind of strikes me as a Joe type, but a Joe that I would say that Joe that doesn't suck, but I think he has more potential than Joe for a couple of reasons. Maybe do you guys see what do you see in Cole? Do you guys see any similarities, or how do you think he is relative to, say, like the typical Joe athletic young male type?
I have thoughts if I may go first here. Remember earlier when I said JP seemed like the guy for a showmance, but he didn't have girls on his tribe that would probably fall for it? Cole might be that guy.
Yeah.
I think because if you look at his 3 words to describe himself were indeed unreserved, dauntless, and flirtatious. Not even romantic, just flirtatious. And that's giving me pause and making me think, okay, well, if he's got girls on his tribe that are willing to get involved in this showmance, then he might be that guy. Actually, I was getting mild, I was getting like slightly, like, not quite Ozzy or not quite Malcolm, but like in that same vibe of like young guy who's like friendly and is like, oh, the outdoors, and like he's the like man candy of the season kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm wondering if that's like the kind of vibe that he'll give off. That just like, you know, the like, I guess, hottie of his tribe is, so to speak. I don't know.
But I think that the thing about Cole, though, is that when you look at Ozzy in particular, Ozzy's someone who isn't really likable, especially the more we got to know him. Joe, I guess he's likable, but I feel like to more audience looking beyond the body, Joe isn't that likable, at least to me. Malcolm's someone who's likable, so
Yeah,
I think the
that's why I said Malcolm
there. But I think that when you look at the Healers tribe, it's the tribe I'm most excited about. You got some big characters we're going to be talking about here, and Cole's definitely one of them. I think the best comparison for Cole, you have to go all the way back to season number 2. I think Cole's going to be like Colby. And I think that the thing about Colby and Cole, which I predict to be similar, is not only their love for the adventure, but I have a feeling that girls are going to want to flirt with Cole. And I actually have a reverse opinion to you, Stacy. I actually think that Cole's the kind of guy who, kind of like Colby's done on, frankly, all 3 of his seasons, kind of push away the flirtations from the girls. And I think that's kind of the role that I could see Cole serving. I think that Cole is flirtatious, but I get the sense that he's here to play the game. And I think that he's someone who I have a lot of high hopes for. I think he's definitely going to be a fan favorite. I definitely think he's going to make the merge, and I think that he's going to be someone we remember. Strategically, hard to tell from what he said so far. Hasn't given a lot of indication one way or the other. But I definitely think he's someone who's a lock to make it pretty far in this game.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying, Ben, is that Cole isn't no Hershey bar?
he may have chocolate draped all over him, but I think he would not allow Gary or anyone for that matter to lick it off. So we'll see what happens with Cole.
Yeah. So I think you guys raise good points, and I at least on the romantic flirtatious side tend to side with Stacey a bit more, just because he does say he has a big heart, and although that could kind of mean kind of an emotional thing, that also
love to say about guys with big hearts. Anyway.
Yeah. So
sorry.
It could also mean so that he's like kind of an emotion, could be potential for some emotional play in his game. Also, he mentioned in one of his interviews that because he's this wilderness therapist, that he's out in the wilderness a lot. And so he said one of the things that one of the implications is that he does not have a lot of time for romance just in general. And so having this opportunity that he is not usually presented with could make him seize the moment, let's say, and fall into a showman's type of thing. But other than that kind of aspect of Cole, I think he is this likable guy, like Ben mentioned, like this kind of Malcolm type in terms of likability. I think the therapy that he does will suit him well, and that one of the things he mentions is that the people that he work with, the younger kids, sometimes lie to him and will not really be truthful with him in the therapy, and his job is to kind of call them out on their crap sometimes, but also be that comforting figure and be like, I'm kind of doing what's best for you. And if he could be that kind of comforting figure in the game, I think that will suit him really well. Ultimately, I think he I guess sticking with my Joe comparison, that he will do a bit better than Joe did on both his times, but ultimately he'll be taken out before finals just because he's too much of a threat. But I'd say he's pretty solidly in the merge. How do you guys think he'll end up doing and placing?
Well, I suppose like when I said off the bat that maybe he's another showman's type, I will say this. I meant it less of a knock of like in the Adam Gentry vibe of like guy who's just there to less that and more of someone who is flirtatious and attractive because he's got the social smarts. I think he's someone who would come off as very empathetic and very like socially adept. And I say that there's there's definitely different kinds of people that get different kinds of characters that get into showmances, and some because they're just there for, and some because they're skilled social players. Like even Parvati, right? Parvati, one of the greatest social players of this game, started out just flirting with everything that moved. And I think that certainly I don't think I'd compare him to Parvati necessarily, but it's to say that being flirtatious isn't necessarily a sign of like not being checked into the game. I think that he comes off as a guy who has, I'm quoting his questionnaire here, mental fortitude and strength. Like he has the social skills there, I think, to potentially make it pretty far into the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually with you guys on that one.
So we can stay even alert in the midst of this flirtatious vibe. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add, Ben?
The only other thing I'd say that we haven't mentioned is that he sees himself as a nerd. And you look at Cole, and the last thing you'd think is nerd, but he sees himself as a nerd. He compared himself to Spencer. It's something that he's kind of echoed in all of his interviews, and we'll see if he has the brain of a nerd as well. But I think that's something to watch out for as well. Kind of the self-perception of Cole versus how the world might perceive him when they see this big buff guy. So definitely someone I'm really excited to watch out there.
Mm-hmm. Right. And yeah, that Spencer comparison is really interesting. Do you think he'll do you think he'll play like Spencer when it comes down to it?
I mean, frankly, James, I'm gonna say that Cole probably doesn't understand what he's meaning when he says that he's gonna be like Spencer. I think he just sees himself as someone. I'm a kind of a nerdy guy. I don't think that he really has the strategic look at the game to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to play from the bottom, I'm going to do this to flip and that. I think he's more talking about it just more from a personality side. Mm-hmm. So in every interview I've seen with him, he's just been so set on talking about it. Yeah, this is the adventure. I'm an outdoorsman side of things, which is really couldn't be more opposite from Spencer, really. So I think that it's less a comparison of how we can expect to see him play the game and more an interesting thing to think about how Cole sees himself.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, that is a great analysis too. Cool. So I guess we're done with Cole and we can move on to Desi. So Desi is the second healer that we're talking about, and she has emerged among a lot of fans as an early favorite, and I have to say, Stacy, she's a very impressive young woman. She's got a lot of accolades to be proud of.
All right. Oh, holy crap! That's a pretty big resume. I'm reading it out.
So,
also, for our audience, whoever they might be right now, is that I just now poured myself some whiskey on the rocks, and we're about to get real fun up in here.
Whoa.
There's a twist. That's a game changer.
Game changer. Here we go.
Yeah. So while Stacey's kind of browsing over the Desi's info, do you have any hot take on Desi?
Yeah, I got a hot take. I think.
Oh, you do? Okay.
The world's really high on Desi right now, or at least a subreddit, and there's a lot of reasons to be. She's really very comparable, I think, to a more alpha Michelle, in the sense that she's kind of the triple Michelle from Co Wrong.
Yeah.
In the sense that she's beautiful, she's a social threat, she's very friendly, but she's also physical, and she's also really smart. So I think that that's a fair comparison. But I also think that because of that, people are really seeing her as a threat, even on the island. And I think that that's something that's going to be the death of Desi. So I see her as someone who's going to make it through the the first swap, but I see her as someone who's likely to get cut down after the swap and before the merge, because I think people are going to see her as, damn, if this girl makes it to the merge, she's someone who could either win a lot of immunities, make some big strategic moves, or even if she chooses to fly under the radar, she could do so whether through flirtation or through just playing a little smaller game. And I think that people are going to recognize her as a threat, and I think that that's going to be the death of her. So I'm excited to see her out there. I think she's someone who has a lot of potential and could make it really far in this game, be a really exciting player. But I think that people have already identified her as a threat on the island, and I think that that'll help her meet her end earlier than we might hope.
Right. And that's the big question for me, for Desi, is that what's it going to be that really carries through in the initial stages? Is it going to be that people are going to see her as a threat and target her initially? Or in what I've seen in other interviews, well, some people have said, oh, she's really stood out. She's not only physically beautiful, but she's also very strong in terms of, just that she's clearly worked out, and she's been in pageants. But a lot of people have also said that they really want to befriend her, and then she gives off a very, charismatic, very approachable vibe. And so it's really a question of which one will carry through. I think, or at least I really hope, it's the second one. And if that's the case, I think she's certainly got the smarts. She's certainly got the physical part. And I think socially, if that part carries through, I think she'll have the social component as well. To make it really far. To be a professor, that really blows my mind at such a young age. That's kind of just a side note, but she's kind of my only concern with her is that she's not a big fan of the show, or at least she wasn't until kind of recently, and she got into a lot of Rob Has a Podcast stuff, but she's done her homework, and I think if she can execute what she's heard, I think that would be a good thing. As long as she doesn't go crazy with doing that. With that being said, do you have bring back in Stacey? What do you think of Desi?
She's got triple threat written all over her. Honestly, I'm kind of excited to see if she follows through on her resume, because she's someone that strikes me right away as being very physically there, socially hopefully also there, and just very very fierce competitor, and someone that probably would go really far if she were able to also not present herself as too clear of a threat. I think that I also think that for the most part, and just based on gender politics and Survivor, is that you tend to go after the male threats, because they ultimately at the end of the day, some of the strongest female threats still wouldn't may not hold their own against your Aussies, your Tom Westmans, that kind of thing. And so in that sense, sometimes I think that stronger female physical threats can hide it for a little bit longer, or can at least go under the radar, at least pointing we've got some big hulking muscle over here. Even if you are yourself very, very athletic, I think she might be able to hide it, and she might be able to get really far. So yeah, but definitely I see triple threat. I see her resume. I am super impressed by it, and she seems like someone who's very kick-ass. So I have high hopes. I do.
And she kind of along those lines, as we mentioned kind of earlier, in that there are potentially a lot of meat shields to hide behind, and maybe that's a strategy that could suit her well. But we'll see when it comes down to it. But on my end, I am very excited about her. I think she's going to do super well and make it very far. Anything else on Desi?
I think we covered it. I like you said, I think if she makes the merge, she's a possible winner. But I just have a feeling she'll be struck down before then. We'll definitely find out.
Yeah. Hopefully, when it comes down to it, looking for people from season 35 to return. If she gets cut early, they'll bring back her and not JP.
There you go.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do this early. Poor dude.
But I guess moving on to our third healer. So I think in alphabetical order that would be Jessica. So Jessica is 29. She is a nurse practitioner, originally from Missouri, but I think now resides in Kentucky. And she has really impressed me in the pregame. Although I don't know how big of a fan she is very excited to be out there and really excited to soak up the entire experience. She has said that she might make a lot of kind of big moves, kind of along the lines of Ashley, but not so much of giving off this kind of stubborn, maybe independent vibe to her. And so I think ultimately might fare better than Ashley, but what do you guys think of Jessica?
You can go ahead, Stacey.
Okay. Well, the first thing I noticed is that she looks very similar to Andrea, and then compared herself to Andrea, and I was like, oh, okay, well, glad we both saw it. But I suppose, and then I read the rest of her interview, and I don't necessarily think that personality-wise that they're that similar, but it was one of those first take, first impression. She kind of gave me that adventurous blonde, kind of same shtick as Andrea, but also I don't know that I necessarily perceive her as strategic and as, you know, cunning as Andrea here. I think that she seems like someone who's a hard worker and like will be like, you know, valuable in challenges and stuff like that, but I don't necessarily see her as a huge you know, social or strategic threat. I don't see her as someone who like would be a great manipulator or a great, like, you know, alliance leader.
Mm-hmm.
So to speak.
And do you think that could possibly be a good thing for Jessica if she doesn't come across as this huge strategic threat? So one of the downfalls of Andrea on her seasons is that people have perceived her as a bit sneaky, a bit underhanded, and that's why she's been cut maybe at the final 8, final 7. So do you think that could be a positive for Jessica here, or do you think it'll be more of a liability?
That's definitely valid, because I think that Andrea also, I think, suffers from a, you know, always a bridesmaid, never a bride kind of complex when it comes to Survivor, where she's so good that they want to get rid of her, you know, quickly after the merge, because you don't want to keep someone around who's that cunning. So certainly there is that potential you know, for potential setup for, you know, her being a little bit better at hiding under the radar, right? And so there's that, but I don't know. I think that she might be someone that gets carried, so to speak. Like she can hold her own at the team challenges, but I feel like if she were to make it to the merge, that I don't think she'd be the one making any big moves. I think she would probably just, you know, duck under. And if she were to get to the end, which I don't know that that would really happen. If she were to get to the end, I don't think she would have many jury votes. I think she strikes me as someone who's just like, yeah, let's do this, but isn't necessarily going to like think and plan and scheme for herself.
Mm-hmm. So Ben, I saw you like nodding in agreement to a lot of what Stacey said. Do you want to jump in or add to that?
Totally, yeah. Jessica's actually someone who I'm super excited about, not from a strategic standpoint. I think Stacey hit the nail on the head there, that she's not going to be like Andrea strategically, but I think that Jessica's really going to stand out as someone super quirky, super fun. The person she actually reminds me, I'm going to go all the way back to Australia again and say that she reminds me so much of Elizabeth from Australia. She's so cute, so quirky, so with everything she does, and even the way she talks and the way she carries herself really reminded me of Elizabeth. And I think that if she makes it far, which I think she probably will because she's so likable, if she does, I think she'll be another big fan favorite. And I think that I actually see her being carried along towards the end of the game, but somewhere cut out around the famous Keith Nail spot, or even if you want to go back further, the Big Tom spot of someone who is not a strategic threat, but someone super likable who a bitter jury might give a vote to. So I could see Jessica floating all the way up to the top 5 or 6 without doing a lot strategically, but still emerging as someone who the audience might get behind because she is so likable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one last thing that I want to bring up about Jessica, and you guys make good points about her potential and how she might play, is that in one of the interviews that I listened to, she said she's looking for kind of a, quote, kind of demon to get behind, kind of like a guy who is not so heroic. She considers herself like kind of angelic and heroic, and she's looking to align with somebody, I think, leaning towards a guy who is not so heroic. But we saw that in Redemption Island, at least that did not work out when people looked to align with Russell. It has worked out when people look to align with Russell and, let's say, heroes versus villains. So we've seen mixed results with this strategy. Do you guys think that would, be a good thing for Jessica if she were to, ultimately go through with this?
I'd be really impressed if she pulled a Natalie versus kind of deal. Yeah. I'd be really impressed. I don't know that will happen, but I think that she definitely has the personality for it. Like, maybe not the most strategic, but definitely like someone who will like smile her way into the late rounds of this game.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
But I don't know that we have a Russell, so we may not have a Natalie, right?
Well, that's where I disagree with you. I think when we get to our next person, we may find our Russell or our Tony, but we'll get to that then. But in terms of Jessica being the one who's carried through by a villain, I could see it happening, but I just hate the idea of coming into the game with such a set strategy. I think Survivor is all about adapting, and I think that coming into the game saying, this is how I'm going to play the game, I just don't think that ends up well. So we'll see how it works, but I think that if she stays to too steadfast on that strategy, I think that would actually be her downfall. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to go.
And Ben, you hinted at it, so we might as well move on to our fourth healer, and that is Joe Mina. And so this guy, Joe, he is, I believe, a correction officer or probation officer, and he is a bit kind of older, on the older side, when it comes to these kind of younger males who are really athletic in this cast. So in that way, he stands out. He also stands out for being very similar to one of Ben's favorite survivors of all time, Tony Vlachos. But as we will know, there will never be another complete second coming of Tony. But do you think, Ben, that these comparisons will be made to Tony, and how do you think Joe will, will handle them, or will this be a thing that comes up?
Yeah, guys, I'm so anti-Joe right now. I think he is just a complete Tony wannabe. I think that he's going to come out. He's going to be like, oh, I'm going to play a big game. And I think that he's going to flame out terribly. It'll be, who I'm going to compare him to? I think Tony is just – comparing him to Tony is someone I think is going to be unfair. I'm going to compare him to Zane Knight from the Philippines, everyone's favorite first boot. And I think that that's kind of the route that Mr. Joe's going to take here. I think that he's going to come out swinging, and I think that people are now so on the lookout for someone playing like Tony or someone playing like Russell, that I think that Joe's going to stick out like a sore thumb straight away, and I could see him making a big play that completely backfires, and I'm going to say that he's going to be a big pre-merge flame out.
That's interesting. Okay.
Not a hot take from Ben.
Stacy, do you what do you think? Do you think he'll kind of flame out like this, or do you see better results for Joe?
I don't know. I think I remember seeing. I don't know. Ben, do you read the subreddit?
A little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. I think right after the cast was announced, someone made a meme of Joe as Tony. So I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, okay, keep in mind, I've only seen Tony 2.0.
Mm-hmm.
So certainly I know that, like, that is entirely different from, Tony 1.0. But I don't know. I don't think that he is quite as loony as Tony. I think, like, Tony's strategy, and as far as what I've read about the time that, his year that he won, is that he, acted kind of batshit, but he totally knew what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And I think that I don't think that this guy is quite as I don't know that he necessarily would have that talent. I don't perceive that from my first impression of him. It doesn't seem like he will. I don't know that he'll play the like crazy winner type quite as well as Tony. So I would also I'm inclined to agree and say I don't think he's quite the second coming of Tony Vlachos over here.
Yeah, I could see him also not doing so great. One of the things that he mentions is his inability to trust people, and that might kind of backfire in this tribe that seems to, on the surface, be a tribe that could really gel together socially, and that leave him possibly ostracized. Although at the end of the day, I actually have a more optimistic take on Joe. I think that even though I agree that he's kind of a cheap Tony knockoff, or he'll try to be, if he does well enough, I do think he is a family guy, that he has a tattoo of his son, and hopefully if he keeps that in mind, that could be a big motivator for him. He seems pretty authentic, and that as a guy who does what he does, he could possibly do a good job of detecting when people are lying to him. And with that being said, I think he'll make the merge. I don't see anything kind of outstanding from him that tells me that he'll make it to the end, but I can see him doing well. And he, that's about it. I don't know how entertaining he'll be, but it's always tough living in the shadow of Tony. So what are you gonna do?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. The only other thing I'd add is I found it really interesting that he said that he is least excited about the fact that he's on TV. And
Really?
I think that that's not fun for us. I like seeing people who are not only good at the game, but good at playing the TV game. And I think that that might skew the edit. So it'll be interesting to follow his, not only his gameplay, but also his confessionals and his edit. So I actually love the fact that Stacy brought up Tony 2.0. And I think that that's actually probably the path that I'm going to foresee Joe going down. Maybe Zane Knight is a bit too pessimistic. I think he'll make it past the first boot, but I think that he'll just be someone who's just running around a bit too much, kind of like Tony 2.0 was.
So we're gonna be out there seeing Joe make spy bunkers. Is that it?
I hope not. I hope this doesn't affect Tony's legacy. That's all I hope for.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Anything else, Stacy, to add on Joe?
I'm good.
All right. So next would be the urologist, Mike. So Mike is also kind of on the older side of things. Perhaps, we could see a similar thing like we talked about on the Heroes, in that maybe these two older guys might be on the outs with Cole and these younger girls, but we'll see. That's just one possibility. But I do like what Mike brings to the table. He kind of reminds me, and I don't know if this is the most apt reference, but he kind of reminds me of David Wright from Millennials Gen X. He can be a bit, what's the word? Maybe a bit like kind of troubling and make people a little uncomfortable at first. And, much as I love David Wright, but, that got him a little bit in trouble at the first vote, maybe second vote. But if he really gets into the game, he seems like he could have a lot of charm. He's a smart guy. He could be likable. And I don't know if you can make it as far as David Wright did, because David Wright was a fan and also a very smart guy. I'm not saying that Mike isn't smart, but I think that will ultimately be the case, and he can get through it, and that he can get the merge. But that's just from me. Do you guys? So Stacy, what do you think of Dr. Mike here?
Pet peeves, double dipping, because I'm a germaphobe. Part of me is like, how can you really? I know it's like, I'm sure it's in jest, but really the fact that double dipping has been proven to really not do much of anything. It's like, well, you are a doctor, aren't you? I don't know if I trust him. I don't know if I trust him with my physical systems, but hey, whatever. But there's a book with Boston Rob though, which is interesting because he doesn't strike me as particularly charismatic. And Boston Rob, but he's still a good leader and charismatic, and that's what drove his game. Insofar as at least he's able to swing people into doing what he wants, and I don't get that vibe from Dr. Mike here.
Yeah.
I see smart. I definitely see smart. I don't know that I see charismatic and charming and manipulative per se.
Yeah, like Stacey mentioned, that is a bit of an odd comparison. That I do not see Mike being a Boston Rob. Ben, do you have anybody else in mind who Mike might be like?
I like the David Wright comparison, I really do, but I see Mike being, one of my favorite parts about Survivor is the metagame and the fact that people learn from the game in past years and adapt to it in their current season. And I think that Mike may fall under the bad side of David Wright, and people on that first vote when he might be not fitting in, when he might be neurotic, people might say, oh, well, if we let him through, he could pull a David Wright on us. And with that in the front of a lot of these people's mind, it might be a bad sign for Dr. Mike. However, I'm rooting for this guy so hard. He's a neurotic Jew, which is my favorite demographic. It's my personal demographic. Right? So how can I not root for him? But I just think that he's a super fan. I just think that he's meant to be a fan of this game and not to be a player. But hey, nothing would make me happier to be wrong about this. But like David Wright though, if he gets through those early boots, I could see him as a late game threat because he certainly knows about this game. He named his son Ethan after Mr. Survivor Africa, so he knows the game. But I just don't see him getting past the early part. I really don't.
Yeah. So you have him as pre-merge.
Definitely.
Yeah. Do you agree, Stacey, or do you see Mike make it a little further?
I'll say maybe a little past maybe at the merge. Maybe I don't know. I think that maybe he could fly under the radar. I don't know. I remain optimistic if he is not at all like Boston Rob. If he ends up trying for the Boston Rob strategy, then he's early. But I think that if he gets on and realizes that that's not how he can play the game, then he has the potential.
The only other thing I'd add before we keep moving here is that Mike is definitely the physically weakest on the tribe, and I have a feeling that that might be another negative for him. Where in a tribe of 10, David Wright may not have, even though he's physically weak, may not have stood out as quite the weakest. In this tribe of 6, if you're not up to par physically, oftentimes that can make you stand out. And so I think that's another factor that could cause Mike's demise. Plus, one other thing is that the person you'd think he'd get along with best in the tribe, just superficially, is Rourke, who we're going to talk about, I think, next, actually, and who's also a super fan. But in Wiggler's first one out, they talked about how they chatted, and their first conversation didn't really go that well. So you think that Rourke would be the person that he'd get along with best because they're both super fans, and if they're not gelling to start out with, then that's not a good sign for Dr. Mike either. So we'll see, but not a lot of high hopes there.
Right. And I think before we move on to Rourke, I think those are great points, especially the fact that he is on a 6-person tribe, unlike David Wright, and Rob has, Sesternino that has preached a lot of time that for the 6-person tribes, there's really nowhere to hide, and so if that becomes a problem, Mike might be in trouble. But we'll see. Hopefully not. I'm also really rooting for this guy, and we'll see how things go. But so we'll round out the healers tribe and talk about Rourke. So Rourke is, I believe, 27, and she is a social worker. Currently, I think, a grad student at USC, still trying to get her degree. And she was once on Rob Hess' podcast at the Chicago event that they had. So maybe if they have another Chicago event, she's around. But so maybe, I don't know, maybe she's from the area, but I don't know. With that,
since here she's from California, Palo Alto.
From California, okay, that's kind of odd that she was in the Chicago one, but maybe she's just in the area. But anyway, I digress. So, let's see. Do you guys have any kind of strong takes on Rourke?
I have many strong takes on Rourke.
Go for it.
You do?
I'm all in on Rourke. She's my favorite. She is the person I'm rooting for. She is. She describes herself as the love child of Sophie Clark and Courtney Yates. She is a super fan. She has I love the fact that she's a social worker. I think that really gives her an edge socially. I think that she'll be able to use that and be able to understand people on an emotional level. And also, she doesn't come across as threatening in this year of massive physical threats. She's strong enough and young enough to not stand out as a weak link, but she's also not strong enough to emerge nearly as much as any of these other players as a physical threat. So I think that she's that sweet spot physically. I think she's going to have a strong social game, and I think she's going to have a phenomenal strategic game. She certainly watched enough of the show, and I have a feeling she's going to be a fan favorite as well in the confessionals. So I'm really all in on Rourke. I think she's going to make it really deep in this game.
Wow.
I don't know who your winner pick is.
Very strong take. Stacey, do you feel the same way? What do you think of Rourke?
Well, I definitely think Ben's views are echoed in the subreddit as far as what I've been reading. I see a lot of Rourke as a goddess, Rourke as a queen, Rourke stands all over the subreddit, and I'm inclined to agree. She comes off as very very fun. I think, like, also I would love to see the love child of Sophie and Courtney. I honestly. And I appreciate the Mean Girls reference in her questionnaire. I like that she said Blue Ivy Carter is her inspiration in life. She strikes me as someone I would want to be friends with. And I think that's like, I mean, maybe that's just like personal bias. I think obviously like people play characters, the edit can be unforgiving, but I think she comes off as someone who like will definitely be a fan favorite. I don't know what that says about her status in the game, but she comes off as someone who like will be talked about.
Mm-hmm.
for a while to come. And that's at least that's what I know for sure.
Yeah.
As far as like how far she'll go, if she like, you know, gets a little too over analytical, I mean, like, as much as we all love Sestrin, you know, like, you know, being that strategic and being that like openly, like, I know exactly what I'm doing will come back to bite you in the ass. Right. So if she can play a little more like fun loving UTR, like I'm not scheming, I'm just, you know, being cool and being social, then, you know, I think she could go very far, because like she looks like she definitely knows what she's doing. But the problem is if everyone else knows that you know what you're doing, you get Andrea, right? So
right. So she kind of reins that in a bit. I think that will be good for her.
Yeah.
You guys mentioned a lot of things to be excited about for Rourke. I think her quirkiness will appeal to a lot of people and make her very likable. She is a kind of non-threat, and I think that in this season, like what Ben was saying, that we have a lot of, you know, physically imposing people and like, you know, mentally imposing people that are just super smart. I think she hits it on the nail in terms of being a good mix of average, or at least coming across as average relative to everybody else. She did mention in her bio that she could be a bit bossy. Hopefully that doesn't rub her the wrong way with people, although we've seen her kind of not get off to the best start with Dr. Mike. But yeah, there's a lot to be excited about with Rourke, and I think she'll do really well too.
All right.
Cool. I guess anything else to add, or should we go on to the Hustlers?
Let's get the Hustlers done, because I gotta be somewhere at 9:30.
Oh yeah, no worries.
All right.
Awesome. The only other thing before we move on about the healers, I want to wrap up the healers as a tribe.
Sure.
And I think that, to me, they're the tribe I'm most excited about. I'm kind of interested to hear your thoughts also as on them as a tribe. I have no idea where the alliances will fall. Do you guys have any takes on where these alliances might fall?
Stacy, do I start on this?
I don't know. I think that, you know, with teams, with tribes like Heroes or like Brawn, I feel like there's definitely like you're picking out who's the strongest, and then those people band together. And I think that's much more prevalent in those kinds of tribes. So this whole distinction of healers is much more ambiguous than I think, you know, previous divisions of like Heroes, Brawn, etc. And I think that because of that, it's definitely harder for me to predict like where the social lines would fall in this. So I definitely agree. I don't think that you know, we have the hero strategy almost picked out at this point. We're like 3 dudes, Ashley, and then, you know, and Chrissy and Katrina on the outside. We have that so established. Like, we have this well-established theory, but we're talking about the healers this whole time, and we haven't exactly brought up any potential alignments. I think that says a lot about how unpredictable I think this tribe is going to be.
Mm-hmm. And I'd also echo a lot of what Stacy said. Jeff Probst said in one of his interviews that, you know, when they were kind of coming up with ideas for the season, that this idea of having healers really appealed to him. And that's kind of where, you know, the heroes and the hustlers kind of emerge from, is that, okay, like, we got to cast these people first, and they have this kind of healer quality. A lot of them do in common. And so let's have a tribe of the healers. And I think an interesting component of having healers tribe, like Jeff pointed out, is having people who typically put themselves first. And I know a lot of the tribes that they've had to try to put together have not been perfect, in that, you know, you have your, you know, not everyone is a white collar, not everyone's a blue collar, no collar, et cetera, brain, brown, beauty, et cetera. But I think this tribe really fits the mold of what they were going for, in that they put a lot of other people first before themselves. But I do think at the same time, a lot of them have a very good head on their shoulders and can think for themselves and could really put themselves first. And I think I could say that besides Cole saying, you know, I have a big heart, even a guy like Cole, they've all expressed a lot of interest in playing the strategic game. And not only that, but being excited about it. And so however the tribes turn out, I think, like you said, there's a lot to be interesting scenarios here. One thing that I kind of threw out before is that maybe because Joe and Mike are kind of the older guys, that they might be kind of cast out because of age. But even that I see as a bit unlikely, given that their personalities are so different. Yeah. And, you know, I know a lot of ways this one can break.
All right.
Yeah. Cool. So I guess with that being said, we'll move on to the last tribe. So we got the Hustlers. Let's see. So I'm trying to think I think the first Hustler is Allie Elliott. So she is a celebrity assistant. She's 24. To me, Allie kind of real, she's there. She's not so much there in the sense of JP. I think she has more personality, and I think being in the world of Hollywood, even as a celebrity assistant, that you kind of have a personality typically, and I think she'll be fun to watch. Although at the same time, nothing really stands out to me to say, Allie's got a lot of winner's equity, or Allie is an obvious first boot. I think she will kind of make the merge, not really make many waves on the season, in a season where you got all these threats and everything. She doesn't really stand out from a physical standpoint either. I think she'll be fine. I don't know how her game will end up turning out, but I don't think she'll be the winner. I don't think she'll be the first one out. What do you guys think?
I'm thinking probably pre-merge. She strikes me as someone who would probably do well in a season where there weren't so many physical. I feel like that we're going through this, maybe we're biased started with the heroes, but I get that there are so many more athletic women here. But in comparison, it's not at all. Like she strikes me as someone who also might not enjoy this too much. She comes off as a little not prissy is the wrong word. I don't want to be sexist here, but I think she strikes me as someone who might not be ready for the outdoors. There's no mention of spending time in the outdoors in her questionnaire responses, and I wonder if that might have something to do with how she fares in the game.
Yeah, it does seem a bit weird to kind of transition from being around a celebrity for a while, not necessarily being a celebrity and getting the celebrity treatment, but just being around a lot of kind of amenities, and then kind of being out in the wilderness. Do you think that will be something that she'll be able to handle, Ben, or how do you think she'll do out in Fiji?
I think the amenities will be the least of her problems. I would call her, dare I say, the female JP. I think she'll be another one who has the potential to make it far in the game, but not gonna get that all-stars or second chances opportunity. I think when we look at the Hustlers here as we move on to this final tribe, we got to put into context the fact that when you look at these 6 individuals, they are so obviously the weakest tribe physically. So I'm just gonna take the stance that these are the folks we're gonna be seeing at Tribal Council the first beginning of this game. And I think that Allie within that tribe though could be someone to make it through the match singing or losoning or whatever you want to call it. And if she does, people who tend to make it through a decimated tribe do tend to make it far through the game. And I think that she's physically strong enough that they may want to keep her. But I think no matter what happens to her, she won't be a factor in the end game. And I think she won't be a factor in being memorable on our television screen. So I think probably she'll be out pre-merge, but I don't have a lot of confidence in that one way or the other. The only thing I'm confident is that she will not be memorable. So maybe that's another, maybe not a hot take, but a harsh take. But I'm here to give my take. So that's where I'm at with that.
Hey, all takes, hot or cold, appreciate it. Like I said, I kind of see her being a bit generic of a merge group. I think that's a good point in that if the tribe gets decimated, that could possibly bode well for her. But if that tribe goes to Tribal Council, though, in fairness, you got a guy like Ryan in a turtleneck who really sticks out like a sore thumb. You got Lauren who does something very different than everybody else. You got Simone who's kind of maybe stirring up some trouble potentially. A lot of and Patrick, who is a little kind of on the wishy-washy side, and she doesn't stand out as the first target for the first boots, but that Hustler tribe could be in trouble, and she could be kind of a very neutral person in the midst of a bit of a chaotic bunch there. Anything else to add on Allie? No. All right. Stacy, do we still have you here? Her screen's a little frozen.
Uh-oh. I didn't
Yeah.
even know. Well, I know she said she was going to be heading out soon, so hopefully she comes back to say goodbye. But
yeah,
in the meantime, just move on and hopefully she comes back in.
Yeah. Let's do it. So that does it with Allie. So I think let's see. Next,
Mr. Pinto is up next.
Pinto. Okay, we got Devin Pinto, younger guy, 24. He's a surf instructor. And the one thing about him that jumps out is he says he wants to play like Ozzy. Right from there, nothing. Not that I don't think he's going to do well, because I do think he's going to do well. I think he and Cole initially kind of struck me as very similar people when I looked at the cast photo initially. Very built, very young, very kind of jovial. But I think Cole is going to do better, and that's partly because Devin doesn't seem to value the social game as much. He's more of a, I want to go out there for the competitions. Nothing there is really saying, I am definitely going to win. He doesn't really seem to have a strategy laid out, except for the final tribal council, where his strategy is just very confusing and doesn't really make me feel confident about him.
Look, Stacy's back.
Oh, you're back. Okay.
Welcome back, Stacy. But it looks like she. Oh, there you are.
All right. Cool. So we're good to have you.
Yeah, my internet I think crapped out for a second. So.
All right. Nice. So we in the meantime we moved on to Devin.
So,
all right.
So yeah, let me give my take on Devin, and then Stacy can catch up and chime in.
Mm-hmm.
Devin, to me, I think you hit the nail on the head again, James. I think I'm totally with you. The only thing about Devin, though, is that you got to remember that this tribe, we're going to expect them to be losing a lot, and Devin's the last person you want to get out. But however, I think after that swap that's inevitably going to come, and probably I'm going to guess a Philippines type swap where you really disintegrate the third tribe and move into two. Just my prediction based on how I think the first immunity challenges will go. And I think that unlike some of the other people on this tribe who might make it through the beginning of the game, Devin will be targeted as a threat immediately after the swap. And so when someone else might be able to fly under the radar after a swap, I think Devin will be picked off initially after that swap. So I think he'll make it past the swap, but I can't imagine him making it to the merge, because I think that if he makes it to the merge, he's, despite all the physical threats, he's someone I tend to see that the physical threats who are most successful in this game are less the Alan Ball super buff guys, and more often the Aussie super nimble guys or girls for sure as well. And I think that Devin, because of that, is such a physical threat, and I really just don't see people allowing him the opportunity to make an immunity run. But I think he's someone with one of the biggest potentials to make an immunity run if he's given the chance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess I kind of see him making the merge, but yeah, I don't know if people will let him make that run if he gets there. So with that being said, so Ben kind of sees him as a post swap boot. I kind of see him making the merge and being that kind of classic, one of the first members of the jury boot. Where do you land in this, Stacy?
I'm probably more with Ben on this one. He strikes me as a little too bro-y. I think one of those things where like he thinks he's so nice. He's like friendly and nice and a little golden retriever-y, so to speak. But he doesn't strike me as particularly strategic. And I think like once his physical luck becomes like the only thing he's holding on to, then it'll be pretty easy to single him out and mark him for elimination. He compares himself to Ozzy, and I'm a little bit like, yeah, a little later era Ozzy where he's like, I'm just gonna continue to like only do physical things and not care at all about the friends that I make. And I'm like, buddy, always a bridesmaid, never a bride. And I'm getting that vibe from him. I'm getting very like kind of like don't care about anything but physicality Ozzy type vibes from him. He definitely seems friendlier than Ozzy. Ozzy's very prickly, I think. You know, you get that vibe later on. He strikes me as someone who would try to be friendly, but I also think that I don't see a strategic acumen in him, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the strategic part is a little lacking. I would agree. I guess kind of to wrap it up on Devin. You said so Stacey comes across as very very broy, which is he definitely does as a surf instructor, as opposed to Cole, who looks very similar, but I think his profession is more in line with what the skills you need to succeed in Survivor. In terms of Cole. So for Devin, a lot of the broy guys, unless you kind of rub people the wrong way, in a maybe Taylor from Millennials Gen X and kind of and get cut in that, there's I would see really no reason besides alliance reasons that people would cut him post swap, just because guys like Ozzy and Malcolm and Joe have historically made it to the merge, although Joe had a close call worlds apart. So, but otherwise, I think we're pretty in line about Devin. Nothing really there to say he'll be a winner, and as far as we know, he'll probably be part of a bad tribe that will need him around to kind of physically contend in those.
That's true. Yeah.
So, I guess that wraps it up on Devin. So with that being said, we'll move on to Lauren. So Lauren, I think she's 36, and I think she is a commercial fisher. Do I have that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So just from kind of background, appearance standpoint, she seems like an outcast on this tribe. Do you think that how do you think she can best integrate herself and be a part of this hustler tribe? Because she has very different upbringing, and she is a fan to a certain extent, but I don't know how much that'll really help her here.
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind with Lauren is I really hope that she's a big character, and I didn't really get that impression from any of the interviews I've seen with her. So you think, okay, she's not the biggest character. She's not going to be a physical threat. I think that she's probably someone who they'll look to get out early. She's on the older and unathletic side of this tribe. I see her as probably the first boot. Unless the Hustlers tribe tries to do something major and get out less of someone for more strategic reasons. But I also think you're totally right, James, that she's probably an outcast. So I think she's probably got some lunch lady Denise upside, but I'm not sure much.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put her down as the first boot, but hopefully she proves me wrong. But because I love lunch lady Denise or janitor Denise, as we came to know her. But we'll see. I just think that she's an obvious first boot, and I think that's what you're kind of alluding to as well, right?
A little bit. I could see it. Although what's working for her, I think, in this tribe of hustlers, which seems to be a bit disorganized, is that I think she can be a breath of fresh air, and that when everyone else is kind of going chaotic and crazy, she could come across as somebody who could say, like, look, I'm out here, maybe I'm not trying to scheme and plot as much as everyone else, and I, come across as this kind of authentic mom type figure, and that could be kind of comforting, as opposed to, maybe, Patrick or Simone who, based on their strategic scrambling or plotting and scheming, could be a bit, off-putting in some regard. So Stacey, did Stacey go?
Yeah, I don't think Stacey's weighed in on Lauren. What do you think of all this, Stacey?
Oh, I think she's gone. She went frozen again.
Oh no! Oh my gosh! Okay.
Yeah. I guess maybe we'll just move on and hopefully. Sure.
Yeah, I feel like Lauren's not someone to devote too much time to. I really think that even if she gets past the first boot, I think that eventually, if these hustlers lose a bunch of challenges, eventually they'll wise up and say, we got to get out our most unathletic player, because I think Lauren will really be holding them back there. So who's next up on our list here?
So I think it's Patrick. So Patrick Bolton. He is a younger guy as well. So he is, I believe, 24. So really young guy to have his own business. And Jeff really likes them. That's kind of when he talks about the hustlers, he brings up Patrick a lot. However, maybe Stacey's coming back with us. Let's see. But anyway, until she does, I don't know. I don't really. You know what I see in him, Ben? Tell me if you think this is a fair comparison. Yeah. Oh wait, Stacey, are you back?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So we moved up. We're on Patrick now.
Okay.
And do you have anything else to say about Lauren?
Oh, I got major lunch lady Denise vibes as well. Tragically, I find her to be less likable though, so I'm not. Yeah, I'm with the whole like team first or second boot kind of deal.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah.
She also, I think I get the lunch lady thing, but yeah, definitely more abrasive. I don't, because she's like, I'm not like any Survivor contestant. I try to do things differently, and I'm like, buddy.
We never like those.
Yeah. You
never want a Maverick in Survivor. It's not how this works.
Yeah.
All right, but yeah, let's go onwards. I definitely think I'm with the whole early boot vibe here.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So when it comes to Patrick, that
guy's gonna burn so bad.
Yeah. So physically, he is a very fair-skinned guy. He will very hot in Fiji, and physically, that might.
They're calling him ripped Cochran, I think, on the subreddit.
You think so? Okay, so or at least
they're calling him a slightly more buff Cochran, and I'm like, all right, well.
So
I don't know.
Yeah. So I kind of see him more as you got this young guy from Alabama. I see him more as a JT guy. So JT, he is very good physically, and Pat seems like he's in good shape, or at least upper body wise, because he moves a lot of furniture. He has this, persistence about him, and he recognizes the importance of the social game, and he kind of sees this, as a, get down and dirty kind of business trip as like sort of similar to JT. But and he said he was willing to do some sneaky things to get by. But, that's something that was not part of JT's game where he won. And you see that when he came back in previous seasons, most recently last season, this kind of character has not done well, especially when you're like Patrick and kind of give off, wishy-washy vibes to people. And so I don't think Patrick is going to do too well here. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but what do you think about that, Stacey?
Well, I definitely think the Cochran jokes are probably more about just the complexion thing. I suppose there's a reason why we see very few gingers on Survivor. My heart goes out to him. As someone who has never burned, only tanned, my heart does go out to the guy. But I don't know. He strikes me as someone who seems likable and very early era JT before the big moves JT, before the love letter to Russell JT. And I think that along that vein, he might be someone who just makes it because he seems very like harmless. Like he strikes me as someone who's just very like not bland, but harmless. You know what I mean? There's like a slight distinction there. Bland, we have JP, but harmless, we have Patrick.
Mm-hmm. So you think that? Do you think that's gonna? How is that gonna work out for him? If people see him as harmless, how far can he kind of get with that perception of him?
I guess it depends on the way you parlay harmless. If you're to make it to a final tribal council and you're someone that like didn't make the big moves, but you can argue that you were behind them, just not vocally behind them, or not like the leader of said big moves, then you can, swing some jury votes your way. But it's definitely harder if you are looked at as a coattail rider. I was just thinking about like how in Cook Islands, I was just thinking about this, like Yul and Becky being so aligned from the beginning and making choices together, even if like Yul was the mastermind, who was very portrayed as the mastermind of all these choices, even though Becky was like right along there with him, but so quiet about it that by the end she was never able to argue that she really had a hand in any of this, and she got murdered at FTC. And I think that that's the problem if you happen to skate by on likability and being the number 2 guy in any sort of alliance. And so I would say that the one thing that I get from Patrick is that like he would have to diversify himself a little bit more. He comes off as very like just friendly and nice, but I'm saying all these generic adjectives because there's nothing sticking out to me.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I think Patrick though is someone who talks a big game, and I think that could go a couple ways to him. He says he's really good at puzzles, and I always find at least one per season of someone who says that they're great at puzzles and then ends up being terrible at puzzles and gets booted for it.
Yeah.
And I think that could be Patrick. So I foresee Patrick being like the second boot on the Hustlers tribe. I think that he's going to the conditions I think are not going to work in his favor. I think he's going to be out of his element, and yet still I think he's going to try to be some sort of alpha or some sort of big player in his tribe. But I think that he won't live up to that hype. So I think that he's going to go out really early in this game, actually. And frankly, I won't be too upset to see it. He really does strike me, and I think he strikes you guys as well as a pretty boring player.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see though. Jeff seems to really like this guy, or at least in the pre-press stuff. So hopefully he proves us wrong, but we'll see. And
maybe Jeff just has a thing for gingers. I don't know.
I mean, every chance he has, he'll be complimenting Cochran. So I mean, maybe
Cochran might have replaced Boston Rob in his heart, and that's a whole lot of love there.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see if Patrick can live up to that hype. It's a big bar to clear, but yeah,
all right.
That's a lot to live up to. So last but not least, I think.
We have 2 more, don't we?
2 more. Ryan and Simone.
Yeah, 2 more. My bad. So Ryan would be next. So my bias is again going to come out because Ryan is from New Jersey.
And is a Giants fan.
Is he? I didn't know.
Who or what is your inspiration in life? New York Giants quarterback Eli Manning is my inspiration in life.
Oh, that's pathetic. That's pathetic. Oh, pick a better quarterback. Pick a better Manning brother.
Right? Oh, no, okay. But Peyton kind of sucks, though.
For a 2-time Super Bowl champion, not too bad of a guy to look up to. But if you look up Google images of Eli Manning, his face isn't too inspirational.
There you go.
Yeah. But anyway, this guy is a bellhop, but he has said he has had a lot more professions, including working, I believe, in Congress and also as a server. A lot going on with this guy. Obviously a big fan. Ben, how do you think Ryan's going to turn out here?
I think Ryan's going to live up to the hype. CBS, he seems to be the guy that CBS is really leading their marketing around, so I have a feeling that he's going to make it really deep in the game, and I think he's going to be super likable. He says he wants to play like Todd. He kind of has a lot of – yeah, everyone loves Todd, and he seems to have a lot of the same mannerisms as Todd, and he's certainly a super fan, and he's certainly strategic, and I am really hoping that somehow Ryan ends up on the same tribe as Rourke, because I could see that being just the best alliance ever. Possibly a Todd and Courtney 2.0 or something. I really am hoping that somehow finds its way to happen. And I see Ryan going really far in this game. I think he's going to be willing to make the big moves when they need to be made. And I think that he really is going to give it all he's got. If he can avoid being an early boot because of his physicality, the only reason I really think that he'll avoid being an early boot is just because of how much marketing CBS is pushing around him, and maybe that's an unfair thing to say. But I think
edit before the show.
We're not making these predictions in a vacuum. There's a lot to take into account, and I think that everything outside the game is kind of falling in Ryan's favor right now. He's already a crowd favorite, and he's already one of my favorites. So I think he's gonna make it really, really far into this game.
Mm-hmm. Stacy, do you think he'll go pretty far, or how do you think he'll end up doing?
I work at a marketing firm. You never waste your money on something that doesn't pay. So I'm with Ben on this one. I think that if he's going to be the star of their promotional materials, I think he at least has to make the merge. I feel like otherwise you don't really. I mean, because I'm trying to think of like the way Rupert was portrayed. He was like America's hero, and he didn't do that well in Pearl Islands.
Mm-hmm.
And so but my thinking is like, if for instance like pre-merge is kind of a dud, you need somebody like Ryan to carry it through. So it's not necessarily a guarantee of his success, but it's probably a guarantee of his visibility. And so along those lines, I think that I would really like to see him and Rourke team up. You had me at Todd and Courtney. The only cup I'm still, I think at the end of the day, Sandra and Courtney are my rice and beans, but like Todd and Courtney was the OG, and I'm here for that kind of pairing, and I think that hopefully it happens. I think it'd be great. I'm especially with all the reasons why Todd won't return to Survivor. Even if we get a knockoff Todd, so to speak, I'd be okay with it.
Totally.
And he seems like someone who's got a sense of humor, can take this all in stride, and is also very, very here for the strategic standpoints of the game, which is definitely important because I've read a lot in recent months about the shift of Survivor from being a lot more about characters and plot arcs and stuff to just being, some say game bot, some say strategically minded, and so that's something that is more important as the years go by. And I think that he's someone who's new school Survivor. He has new school written all over him, and I think he's going to go very far.
Yeah.
The Giants, though, not so much, but
I'm not losing hope too soon. We'll see how they do.
Oh, Friendo, okay.
If Sunday's any indication, that's not going to go too hot. But but in terms
good
of
luck, bud.
I got a lot of great things to say about Ryan, and a lot of them you guys already touched on. Is that he's very obviously he's a super fan and he knows the importance of the social game like Todd, and he does strike me as somebody who can play like Todd. More than that, he also has a great sense of self-awareness. He knows that guys might look at him kind of weird if he has like a turtleneck. And he also knows that in this game, it's good to kind of be this average person. He said he can hold his own physically. Strategically, he's not going to really kind of jump out, or at least in the eyes of other people. And also strategically, he has like the patience to say, I'm going to make a move when the time is right, and not necessarily get out there as a super fan and kind of go crazy.
Okay, Zeke.
Yeah, and he's just also a really funny guy. Like I would, if I was on his tribe, I would really want him around. Like I was listening to one of the interviews that he did, and he's like, one of the things that made me laugh out loud, he's like, a lot of these other guys, like they're like naturals out here, big, buff, strong. Like that's not me. I look like I belong in an air-conditioned room getting ready for a spelling bee. Like that's me. Like
That's so precious.
So I, really, really likable guy. I loved him in the interviews. I can listen to him all day. And also he's from New Jersey, so that doesn't hurt either. So I also see him doing very, very well. And hopefully the him and Rourke thing could work out. But yeah, no, anything else on Ryan?
I think this was a side thing that I thought about earlier when we were talking about the ages of the players. He's 23. I just turned 23, and it's one of those realizations that how you say like when you realize you're old when you're older than the pop stars. And I had that realization about 4 years ago, and then I had the realization that you feel old when you're older than NFL rookies and professional athletes. And now I'm at the point where I feel old when I'm older than the Survivor players. But it's definitely something to feel like, oh wow, this guy's like super kick ass. He's like he's at least my age. And seems like someone that like if I knew in real life I would probably want to be friends with, and I think that's like something that makes me want to root for him. That's like, oh yeah, you're like this funny silly dude that if I met at U Chicago I'd definitely want to be friends with. And that's something that like makes him very rootable, and I think that's just personal bias on my end. I think he comes off as someone that like Rourke is someone that I want to root for just because they're nice and cool and sound really fun to be around.
And yeah, so hopefully
and the time reference is good.
Yeah. And Todd was pretty young when he won too, so hopefully he can go out there, at least take bits and pieces of what he's learned and put it to good use. I think he benefits from people like Todd, people like Spencer coming before him, and hopefully he can go out there and make those other 23-year-olds proud, like you, Stacey.
Awesome.
All right. I guess that wraps up Ryan. So our last player is Simone here. So.
Oh, I don't know if you guys are getting this too, but I can hear myself, and I can hear James echoing on top of himself.
Yeah, I just picked that up. Do you have that same problem then?
No, everything's fine on my end, but I don't know. We can just keep going forward, and hopefully it works itself out.
Yeah.
Maybe Stacey, we can mute ourselves or something.
Yeah.
Like mute the sound on our computers.
You don't have this up elsewhere, do
Wait,
you?
never mind. That's a bad idea.
Well,
you guys are. You have the YouTube window open. That might cause a duplicate sound.
Let's see.
Am I echoing?
Nope.
Cool. Well,
I just heard myself though.
While you guys are working that out, let me talk to you a little bit about Simone, because
Simone
is someone who I think could go so many different ways. I think she is the most.
Have your feelings.
She's the greatest array of possibilities in this game. I think Simone is someone who could be a first boot, and I think Simone is someone who could make it to the end. She's incredibly strategic. She's incredibly cutthroat. She's someone who is going to be out there as a villain and proud to be a villain. But I think also she's not the strongest, and she's not the most personable. So she's someone who could go out early. I have no idea where to place Simone. But I think that no matter what happens, she'll be someone we remember for a long time, because I think that she's really going to stick out on this season. There's not too many people looking to play too much of a villainous game, at least from the pregame. And I think that she sticks out as someone who up front wants to play a villainous game, and I think that that's something that's always exciting to see. And you can even see it in the cast photo. She is the only one without a smile on her face, and I love that. So I'm going to be rooting for her as someone who I'll love to hate, but I think she very easily could go out very early. So I have no idea where to place Simone. Do you guys have any more clarity on this, or are you kind of up in the air with her as I am?
I'm kind of with you. I think that she's either like number 2 out or almost at the end.
Totally.
And strikes me as someone who she's either gonna get dragged to the end of the boat, or she's gonna be the second.
Good point.
I think I guess I land a little bit differently than you guys on Simone here. I think the negatives for her is that, like Ben said, and like you guys said, she has a tendency that she can possibly stir the plot. And if somebody catches up to her, that might not be a good thing. She's also a little judgy. Maybe if people, I think Stacey. Am I still echoing? Or?
No, all's good on my end. Keep going. I was enjoying what you were saying.
Okay, yeah. I guess we'll just kind of deal with that for the end of the podcast. But she is, on the positive side, a Columbia grad, and so coming from very elite school, I think certainly got the head on her shoulders to do well. I just think that she's going to be cut down at a certain point, and I think that'll be right at the merge. And as opposed to the traditional male merge boot, I think she'll be seen as a strong female that will.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, that was weird.
Oh, did it? Oh, I think Stacey muted me, but just to.
Oh no, I did that to see if I could turn off the sound on my end, and then I realized that I actually muted the whole chat. I'm very sorry.
It's okay. We're learning. That's part of the fun.
No worries. Let's see. So yeah, I think she's gonna go out at the merge. And I guess in general, we'll kind of work through the down things at the end of the podcast, so we're basically done. Any more thoughts on Simone?
Can't wait.
Yeah, I'm just really crazy. I just have no idea where to place her. I think the merge boot's an interesting thing. You never know. I really could see that as a possibility, or I could see Stacey's perspective, where she either goes out early or is taken to the end. I think we all kind of agree that she's not going to win this game, and that's good that we all agree on that. But that doesn't mean she can't be fun. So definitely looking forward to seeing her out there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, I think hopefully she'll be pretty fun, and if we get those professionals, that'll even be better. So I guess that wraps up our conversation on all of the contestants. So I guess to wrap up this podcast, we can make our winner picks officially, get them on the record out there. Whoever wants to kind of go first and explain why you picked a certain person as a winner, go for it. Or if you guys don't want to start, I can start with mine.
You can start, James, or Stacy. Whoever.
Yeah. James, you led this whole shebang. You go first.
All right. A lot of pressure here. So for me, it came down to three people who really impressed me on every tribe. For the heroes, it was Chrissy. For the healers, it was Desi. And for the hustlers, it was Ryan. So it's really tough deciding on who to pick. I think Desi stood out a little too much as that. Just given that people said she was a little bit physically imposing, and that so many people pinned her as a threat to the list. On the other hand, Ryan could do pretty well, but I think he kind of one thing that's not going for Ryan. I kind of wrote down why as a winner somewhere here. But let's see. So the downside is that he's kind of like a talkative guy, and he can be like a little bit like make people a little bit strategically unsure. Kind of as a younger guy, maybe people not want to trust him as someone who doesn't have too much life experience. So that's why I ultimately chose Chrissy to win, just because it's a combination of having a great education, being a mom, having that experience, working in the corporate world, very charismatic, and I think even though she's kind of on the older side, a lot of people will be able to trust her because she's seen as such a credible source, and she's also articulate, and she comes as an actuary of mind that's really going to help her, as well as her status. So I'm officially picking Chrissy as my winner.
I love it.
Done?
Stacy, you want to go next?
No, I'll go last. I want to go last.
Okay. I think that I can piggyback off of James's explanation there, because I actually agree with him on a lot of things. I think that Chrissy has the potential to make it to the end. I just think the game she will have to play based on the tribe that she's on and based on the situation that the way I foresee this game is I think the first couple boots will come from the Hustlers tribe, like a Lauren and a Patrick, just in my eyes. I think one boot from the heroes and one boot from the healers. I would say Katrina and Mike get the boot before the first swap. Then after that, we'll have some nonsense at the swap, and I think that Chrissy will start to make her move through this game, and I definitely think she will be someone who has the potential to make it through to the end. But I think the game she'll have to play to make it to the end is one that won't garner her a lot of votes in the end. I think she's going to have to backstab a lot of people to make it to the end, and I think she's probably doesn't have the warmness of someone who can stab you in the back and earn your vote in the end. So like I said, I see Chrissy in third place. Now, Ryan is someone who I see coming in at second place. I think that he's going to get an equal amount of votes as my first place person. And the one reason why I do not pick Ryan to win, and this is a silly one, is that in the history of Survivor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've read this a few times. In the history of Survivor, no one who is on the reunion show, they show a few contestants. Yeah. No, Ryan was one of those contestants. And in the history of the show, no one on that preview has won the game. So maybe that's a petty reason, but I'm going to use that and say that crosses Ryan off my list. And I think that he will be someone to make it the final tribal council, but I think he'll lose. And the person he'll lose to, I said I was all in on her before. I'm staying all in on her now, and that's Rourke. I think that it's going to be Chrissy's decision, and I think that Chrissy will decide between Ryan and Rourke on that tie vote. And I think that Chrissy will side with Rourke. I think Rourke's someone who's just mediocre enough on everything to make it through in terms of a threatening level, and she's strategic enough to get to the end and do what she's got to do to make it there. So I'm going to say Rourke is my winner, and I really really hoping for that because I just love her as a character, and I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with her no matter where she places. But I also think that she's got what it takes to win this game.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Solid choice. All right, Stacey, close it out.
You know, I like your final three scenario, but I think that Ryan would win that. I think that, you know, if history is going to prove itself and we're going to have a Todd and Courtney 2.0, which, again, not entirely accurate, but I'd love to see it. And if it's Ryan to work at the end with, you know, Chrissy being a deciding vote or somebody else, or, you know, like someone pulling an Amanda, right? That you have someone who's so charismatic and will sway a jury that might not really know which of the two that they want to pick. And I think that if Ryan is as charismatic as we're giving him credit for, that might pull a Todd and speak out in the end. So I'm going to go with Ryan in your hypothetical situation.
I love how similar we all are. We're all kind of seeing this the same way. So hopefully that makes for a fun season, not a boring season. If we all know how it's going to work out, that's no fun. So I kind of want us to be a little bit wrong, so we have something to keep us excited through the season. But
yeah.
I love these characters. I think that this will be a really season. And, I kind of love those. I'm kind of an old school fan like you are, Stacey, and I do love the strategy. But I'd love to see some big characters emerge. And I definitely think there's a lot of potential for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this cast
some good art.
I think there's a lot to see, and a lot of great winner picks. I think all three people, Rourke, Ryan, and Chrissy, can do really well as a lot of other people in this cast. Maybe not perfect amount of super fans we like to see, but all in all, good people, and it'll be good to see how it plays out in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. I will say this: there's a difference between who you think will win and who you want to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not for me. Not for me.
Oh no,
for you,
okay.
but for me, I'm all in on Rourke. I'm 1,000,000% in.
All the chips.
There you go.
I see Ryan, but part of me is envisioning this, you know, maybe all-female final three of, like, say, Chrissy, Rourke, and like Ashley or something, or Desi maybe. Someone dark horsing their way into the end who we think isn't necessarily the most, or like the strongest front runner, but shows up anyway. And part of me is thinking, you know, what if Simone gets dragged to the end as a goat and is number 2 to Ashley? I don't know. I mean, I think that'd be kind of bonkers. I think that'd be really fun.
Definitely.
But I'm excited to see it. I'm glad that there are fewer duds than I was expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Billy will win,
The star of the season, JP. No one picked him as the winner.
Oh
What are we doing?
What if he wins?
I'm in the rough. Yeah.
JP versus Ali Elliott in the tied.
Who you got?
We'll see. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'm just so excited to be talking Survivor again, and I'm really glad you had us on, James. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, same on my end. I'm really happy to have both of you on, and it's been great talking to everything with you guys.
Awesome.
Hey, maybe we could do this live. Like all in person.
Totally.
Oh yeah. If we get a good enough of a following, I know a couple other people who'd be interested in actually jumping in this season.
I love it.
So we'll see there. Hopefully, I'll get a good amount of people out for the premiere and get them all into the show. And it's excited the three of us.
Awesome.
All right.
So,
any final words for us, James, to sign us off?
Yeah.
Sign us off with some words of inspiration, my friend.
Some words of inspiration. So this has been episode 3 of the Marooned. Not the Maroon.
Get your name right.
Thanks, Ben and Stacey, for joining me again, and hopefully we can do this again mid-season or wrap things up at the end. So with that being said, we'll hopefully see you again sometime in the future.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Have a great weekend, y'all.
Yep, you too.
All right. Thanks, dude.
Bye-bye.